Introduction. Mark, a modern-day everyman, finds solace in the simple pleasures of life, such as indulging in television dramas. One evening, while leisurely strolling after work, he encounters an unexpected situation. In a heroic act to save a young girl, a complete stranger, he is abruptly struck by a speeding dump truck and transported into a captivating television series he had been following, gaining a remarkable ability assignment system. This system rewards him daily with an array of prizes, including weapons, equipment, and masterful skills in forging, architecture, and shipbuilding. With a stroke of luck, he might even summon a dragon in this enchanting world filled with magic, dragons, and faceless beings. Chapter 1. The Beginning of Rebirth. On Earth, in the Dragon Kingdom, Tianan City, the skyline is adorned with towering skyscrapers, and the incessant flow of vehicles illuminates the city that never sleeps. While the city thrives, the pedestrians traverse hurriedly, seemingly devoid of laughter and joy. Each individual bears the weight of life's burdens, work, family, and financial stress, rendering them breathless and oblivious to the beauty surrounding them. The societal shift has transformed everyone into mere cogs in the machinery of life, with Mark as one of the masses. Yet, there are those who, like Mark, find a semblance of ease in their existence, living comfortably without the constant struggle to survive. As twilight descends, Mark, as customary, strolls through the streets after dinner. His gaze wanders amidst the shimmering city lights, observing the familiar scene of individuals hurriedly making their way, heads bowed in quiet contemplation. Grateful for the simplicity of life, caring only for his own needs, and escaping the relentless hustle, Mark relishes this existence, though it bears the monotony of a mechanized routine. As he strides forward, he suddenly notices a woman engrossed in a phone call on the sidewalk, oblivious to the fact that a small girl has wandered into the street. Coincidentally, a large truck hurtles towards them, seemingly undeterred due to a blind spot in the driver's line of sight. Instinctively, Mark, embodying the spirit of a new generation, cannot stand idly by as tragedy looms before him. With an overwhelming sense of justice, he rushes forward to push the girl out of harm's way. But in the process, he fails to escape the oncoming truck, which strikes him and sends him flying several meters. The sound of impact is jarring. The driver, having caught sight of Mark, is unable to brake in time, and the collision is catastrophic. Pale and visibly shaken, the driver fumbles to open the door, hesitating before stepping out. He lights a cigarette, seemingly to calm his nerves, and then exits the vehicle, muttering a string of unseemly expletives. Damn it. Why am I so unfortunate? Truly, I should have checked the almanac before stepping out. How did I end up with such a calamity? If I had known, I wouldn't have indulged in those 2 shots of liquor. Now, what am I to do? If they find out I was driving under the influence, my license will surely be revoked. The driver, filled with regret, slapped his forehead and gazed at the young man sprawled on the ground, propelled by the force of the collision, who now had no hope of survival. Yet, clinging to a flicker of hope, he approached Mark, cautiously checking for breath. It was evident that divine favor had not graced him. Mark had ceased to breathe the moment he was flung through the air, lying lifeless on the ground, blood still oozing from his body, creating a ghastly scene. Mark hovered above the driver, listening to the man's frantic curses while observing his own broken body on the pavement. At that moment, his memories were frozen in the instant of the impact. Though still reluctant to believe he was truly dead, the transparency of his hands and the absence of sensation as he passed through power lines confirmed the grim reality. He glanced down at his corpse, then at his own ethereal form suspended in midair, and realized that he had indeed succumbed. This was an irreversible truth. With a shake of his head, he sighed deeply. His gaze shifted to a little girl in the middle of the road, now cradled in a woman's arms, who was comforting her. The woman was on the phone, reporting the incident. Mark felt a sense of relief, knowing that help was on the way. At least she was aware enough to call for assistance. Meanwhile, a crowd had gathered around his lifeless body, taking photos, revealing a morbid curiosity prevalent among his countrymen. He knew that tomorrow, these images would proliferate across the internet and might even make it to the news, as unscrupulous journalists sought sensationalism for clicks. They would spin tales of heroic rescues, perhaps portraying him as a man who disregarded everything to save a little girl, while simultaneously condemning bystanders for their inaction. What a dismal reflection of morality and the human condition. Some will elevate one side while disparaging the other, and then there will be a dramatic twist. It's utterly appalling. Mark, exasperated, pressed his forehead in disbelief at how far journalists would go to garner attention. Yet, even in his current state, he realized that regretting his actions was futile. If given the chance to relive that moment, he would still choose to push the little girl to safety. After all, perhaps it was the innate goodness within him that compelled such actions. Reflecting on his brief life, he found solace in having performed a noble deed. It was not in vain. Such acts might earn him favor in the afterlife, perhaps even a fortunate rebirth. Having died while doing good, he mused that he might have already secured a blessing. He cast aside these thoughts and looked down at the gathering crowd, hoping they would refrain from sensationalizing the tragedy. Reflecting on Mark's current state, it seems that everything has lost its significance for him. The response to the incident was swift, quickly surrounding the scene and evacuating the nearby crowd, which brought a measure of relief to Mark. Mark's lifeless body lay on the ground, yet his soul persisted, capable of coherent thought. He found himself questioning whether he was dead or still alive. In this moment, Mark lacked a definitive answer. After all, no one had ever informed him of his condition. Thus, he cast aside his chaotic thoughts and adopted a posture of resignation. As he observed the arrival of the personnel, they efficiently tidied up the aftermath. Mark's soul watched as his body was meticulously cleared away, leaving no trace behind. A thought crossed Mark's mind. Perhaps it was merely a step away from cremation before his existence would be entirely erased from the world, destined to be forgotten. He often felt he had contemplated a great deal, ultimately resulting in a mere sigh. It no longer matters whether they remember or forget, let things unfold as they may. Mark had lost track of time when suddenly he felt an inexplicable pull, as if something was drawing him into an abyss. When he opened his eyes again, the surroundings appeared shrouded in a gray haze, rendering time and space indiscernible. Mark drifted aimlessly, engulfed in profound solitude, acutely aware of the lifelessness of this colorless expanse. Each day was a monotonous repetition of aimless drifting, transitioning from a vibrant world to this endless chaos, plunged into a realm that defied description. Though initially curious, the passage of time bred a sense of tedium, rendering his existence dull and uninspiring. After an indeterminate duration, one day a beam of light suddenly approached, poised to penetrate his soul, prompting Mark to instinctively raise his transparent hands in defense against the impending death. However, he soon realized the futility of his efforts, as the light passed directly through his hands, crashing into his essence. Mark found himself bereft of the will or ability to resist, surrendering completely to the inevitable. As he awaited the obliteration of his soul in silence, he was abruptly struck by an unseen force, losing all sensation of his surroundings. It felt as if he had been kicked, and then darkness enveloped him. Chapter 2. Transformation into Infancy. Year 254 of the Conquest. Westeros, the North, Bear Island. Located in the northwestern region of the continent of Westeros. It is also situated to the northwest of Winterfell, an island overlooking the Wolf's Wood and the sea. To the north lies the land of eternal winter, where the frozen coast meets the island across the waters. In a world that once basked in tranquility, an unexpected visitor appeared abruptly. A brilliant beam of light flashed from the highest point of the realm, only to vanish into the vast sea of sunset. Bear Island, resembling a curving neck amidst the ocean, features a somewhat dilapidated harbor and a castle steeped in history, located near the Wolf Forest. Constructed from stone and timber, the castle's walls are now adorned with creeping moss and vines, bestowing upon it a unique aesthetic charm. Surrounding the fortress is a rudimentary wooden fence, weathered by the relentless coastal winds, lending it an air of fragility, as though it might crumble at the slightest touch. At the entrance of the castle, a stone wall is intricately carved with the image of a woman draped in bear skin, while a child clad in animal hide suckles at her arm. The woman wields a battle axe in her other hand, her vigilant gaze scanning the surroundings, seemingly on guard against unseen threats. Atop the ancient castle, a flag flutters, emblazoned with the image of a black bear amidst lush greenery. The bear stands resolute, its paws poised as if ready to pounce, embodying a spirit of ferocity that tears through all obstacles. This banner, symbolizing familial significance, dances in the sea breeze. Scattered around the castle are seemingly chaotic, yet genuinely disordered dwellings, primarily constructed from a blend of wood and stone, along with some made from singular materials, together creating a distinctive little town. Today, this town is particularly lively. The toiling populace momentarily halts their work, their unified gaze drawn towards the slightly worn castle at the center, their eyes brimming with anticipation, many engaged in fervent prayers. This day holds great significance, and the castle is bustling with activity. The door to one of its chambers swings open and shut, as numerous individuals enter and exit. Despite the throng, each person has a clear role. Some carry hot water inside. Others cleanse fabrics, while a few emerge with bloodied water, the destination of which remains uncertain. Meanwhile, others bear precious pieces of cloth into the room, seemingly for a person of utmost importance. Within the chamber adjacent to the Lord's hall, the anguished cries of a woman in labor pierce the air. Though candles illuminate the dimly lit room, the woman's agony is palpable, attended by a maid and an elderly man with graying hair, who busily tend to her. The elderly man repeatedly urges, "Madam, push. The head is emerging. You are on the brink of success. Hold on just a little longer. Take tea this moment." Outside the door stands a young man, approximately 25 years of age, slightly balding with gray hair, adorned in a somewhat lavish garment. On his chest is a distinct emblem resembling the flag atop a castle, depicting a proud black bear. This remarkable figure, exhibiting an air of urgency, anxiously gazes into the room from the doorway, his heart evidently racing with concern as he observes the female attendants bustling in and out. Beside him stands a petite woman, exhibiting a composed demeanor. Despite her diminutive stature, she possesses a certain robustness, her gray hair framing her face. Unable to contain herself, she addresses her anxious brother. "Brother, there is no need for such unease. The old God shall bless my sister-in-law with the safe delivery of a healthy child." Moreover, within, there is the esteemed bachelor Jerry, who has delivered the majority of the children on Bear Island and possesses ample experience. "Surely, you do not doubt his capability?" Encouraged by her words, the young man finds a measure of calm, though his gaze remains fixed within, his attentive eyes unwavering as he speaks distractedly. "Indeed, I hold great faith in Bachelor Jerry, whose knowledge is renowned throughout the kingdom. However, I have heard him express concern regarding my wife's condition, suggesting the possibility of her delivering twins, which raises the stakes considerably. This thought greatly troubles me, as I worry for Clena and the children." At that moment, an exuberant maid bursts forth from the room, evidently bearing good news. "Congratulations, my lord. Your wife has given birth to 2 boys, and both mother and children are in good health, though she will require some time to recuperate." Hearing this, the weight upon the young man's heart finally lifts. He promptly instructs the surrounding servants to distribute provisions to the townsfolk, wishing to share his joy with them. With a joyful expression, he rushes inside, while his sister trails behind, shaking her head with a mix of exasperation and understanding, delighted at the arrival of her 2 nephews. Moreover, her brother does not forget his duty as the lord of the island, recognizing the importance of sharing his happiness with his people, a true hallmark of a commendable leader. Following closely behind him, she senses the departure of his usual composure. He, who typically remains unflappable even in the face of savages or iron men, now radiates a palpable excitement. It appears that, after the birth of his son, he revealed a softer side beneath his rugged exterior. His countenance exhibited a blend of 7 parts joy and 3 parts sorrow. Perhaps the turmoil of first-time fatherhood rendered him somewhat flustered, yet it is likely that he will soon regain his composure. A fleeting thought crossed his mind, only for a petite woman to shake her head and dismiss it. She then followed suit, pushing open the door to the room. Earlier, she had been preoccupied with speaking of her brother, yet now she felt an overwhelming curiosity towards her 2 little nephews, exhaling deeply as she stepped inside. Mark felt a sticky sensation enveloping him. With great effort, he struggled to open his eyes and began to twist his body, only to be met with a multitude of unfamiliar faces, most adorned with chestnut gray hair and fair skin. Still reeling from the sudden brightness, he found himself repeatedly uttering the names of the gods, grateful for his continued existence. Once he regained his bearings, he surveyed his strange surroundings. Suddenly, a refreshing chill cascaded over him, prompting him to turn and look beneath him. He discovered himself cradled in the hands of a woman resembling a medieval maid, while another maid busily scooped water from a wooden basin beneath him. Steam rose from the basin, and warm water continued to cleanse the grime from his body. Mark pondered in confusion, his mind racing with questions. Where's this place? Was I not in a gray, misty void? Have I been reborn? Why am I submerged in water? Have I shrunk? How did I suddenly become so small? He glanced at his brother, relieved to see that the little fellow was still present, vigorously waving his tiny hands. To onlookers, this was a symbol of vitality. Indeed, the maid, sensing the child's energy, remarked in awe, Young master is remarkably strong, possessing such power at such a tender age. He is destined to flourish, perhaps becoming a great warrior lord in the future. One maid, observing Mark being bathed by another, added with a competitive spirit, of course. Just look at how adorable he is now. He will undoubtedly grow into a handsome young man, charming countless noble women. Though Mark could not comprehend their words, he could see his chubby little hands, adorned with the unique wrinkles of childhood. He realized he had transformed into an infant, and despite this regression, he felt a sense of fortune in merely being alive. He attempted to vocalize, but the sound that emerged was a wailing cry. Sensing the maid's unease, Mark promptly ceased his cries and smiled at her. As the young man entered, he took the newborn Mark from the maid's hands. Cradling the adorable infant, he couldn't help but smile before turning his gaze to another baby, born shortly after Mark. With a look of joy, he addressed the elderly man beside him, whose hair was tinged with gray, yet bore a weary expression beneath his black robes. "I'm immensely grateful, Bachelor Jerry. Without your assistance, Clena would not have had such a smooth delivery of these two children. Your vast knowledge has once again aided our family. Please, I urge you to take a moment to rest. I have arranged for a banquet in your honor, and I shall ensure you are invited." The elderly man, referred to as Bachelor Jerry, despite the wrinkles adorning his face, possessed eyes that sparkled with vitality. He bowed slightly, a smile gracing his lips as he replied at a leisurely pace. "Thank you for your kind acknowledgement, my lord. Indeed, I should rest. I feel age creeping upon me. Merely assisting with the delivery of these two young masters has left me feeling quite drained. I find myself lacking the vigor I once had. You are still young, Bachelor Jerry. Please take care of your health. I intend to entrust my children to you for their education in the future," the young man said, observing the elder's fatigue with concern. Holding Mark close, he offered rare words of comfort. "It seems that with the arrival of your two children, you have truly matured, Gio," Bachelor Jerry remarked before departing, leaving Gio to ponder that perhaps it was the weight of fatherhood that had brought about this growth within him. In Gio's arms, Mark, with his twinkling little eyes, attentively surveyed his surroundings and listened to the adults' conversation. He realized he could not comprehend their words, despite his earnest attempts to decipher their speech, which bore no resemblance to any language from his previous world. Desiring to speak, he instead emitted a cry, which led his pale-faced mother to mistakenly believe he was hungry. However, Mark did not feel the pangs of hunger. Rather, he sensed a tinge of embarrassment as his mother prepared to nurse him. Just as she was about to feed him, he turned his head, his large eyes wide with curiosity. After a brief observation, drowsiness overcame him, and he closed his eyes, succumbing to slumber. Approaching the bedside, the young man gazed at his pale wife. Though weary, her face radiated happiness, and he spoke tenderly. "Clena, you have endured so much. I am deeply grateful for your sacrifices and for bringing forth two strong warriors for the Mormon family. Just look at this little one. He is destined to be a formidable fighter, his cries as resounding as those of his brother." He gently presented Mark to Clena, then glanced at the other child lying beside her, noting how the tiny newborn nibbled on his own little finger. "This young lad is indeed remarkable," he cried out lustily at birth, yet now he remains serene and quiet. "Surely, he shall grow into a formidable warrior in the future." Lying in bed, her complexion still pale, yet adorned with a blissful smile, the woman gazed upon her two children, basking in her husband's praise. She spoke softly, her voice a gentle whisper. "Jiao, at this moment, I feel an overwhelming sense of happiness, and I consider myself fortunate to have given life to our two children. Have you decided on names for them?" The young man, referred to as Jiao, fell into deep contemplation as he observed their eldest son, who had already drifted into slumber, and glanced at the younger son, who lay peacefully beside him. After a moment, he lifted his head and declared, "The firstborn, our eldest, shall be named Mark Mormo. The second, our younger son, will be called Jor Mormont. What do you think?" Kleina nodded gently, her satisfaction evident with the names Jiao had chosen for their sons. "I too am quite fond of these names. Our eldest shall henceforth be known as Mark, and our younger as Jorah." At this moment, a silent woman standing nearby, observing her two nephews, finally spoke up. "Mark and Jorah, these lads are clearly destined to be warriors. Once they grow a bit more, I shall assist you in training them." The young man exchanged a joyful glance with his wife, Kleina, and exclaimed, "That sounds splendid, Maggie, as long as you don't mind the trouble they may bring." The room was enveloped in an atmosphere of merriment. Chapter 3. The life of an infant in Westeros. As the first rays of sunlight pierced through the crevices, they illuminated Mark's face. With his innocent and childlike gaze, Mark stared despondently at his hands, a look of disdain crossing his features as he brushed over them. He then earnestly surveyed his surroundings, finally able to discern the location that had eluded him the previous night. The word squalid echoed in his mind, for the walls surrounding him were constructed from unrecognizable stone, and the wooden ceiling overhead showed signs of age in several places. Mark lay nestled in his infant cradle, fearing that he might be ensnared in a dream. He decided to test his reality. Gently pinching himself, he was met with a sharp pain that jolted through his nerves, prompting him to instinctively cease his self-inflicted torment. He understood that a new chapter of his life was about to unfold, and he eagerly anticipated the prospect of growing up swiftly. Beside Mark was another infant of similar age, gnawing on his little finger and gazing curiously at their surroundings and at Mark himself, punctuated by a silly grin. Mark thought to himself, utterly bemused, and could not help but vocalize his thoughts. This foolish little creature, did a kick to the head occur during birth? Surely he cannot be my future brother. With such intellect, the days ahead may prove arduous. Yet, upon reflection, he found that his brother's demeanor embodied the essence of true infancy, with innocent eyes brimming with curiosity about the world around him. Were anyone able to hear Mark's musings, they would undoubtedly be astonished. Although the sounds emanating from his mouth were merely incoherent babbles, they possessed an undeniable rhythm, emerging from that tiny orifice. Mark, now incapable of articulate speech, found himself bewildered by the language of this unfamiliar realm. In this moment, he felt a mixture of relief and profound frustration. For he had transformed from a dashing young man in his 20s into a freshly born infant, thrust into a foreign land where the spoken words were utterly incomprehensible. One thought consumed him: I am utterly overwhelmed. Yet, recognizing the futility of lamentation over what had transpired, he resolved to relinquish his past and embrace the present. Mark quietly observed his surroundings, realizing he had emerged in a markedly primitive setting, permeated by an acrid scent. It resembled the abode of a feudal lord, with servants tending to him, yet the words spoken by these attendants were entirely lost on him. As his large eyes darted around, one of the servants gently lifted him and handed him to a woman lying on the bed, her pallor suggesting a recovery from the previous night's distress. Mark gazed at her with curiosity, pondering the profound sense of connection that suggested this woman was indeed his mother in this lifetime. It was unmistakable, and he realized he was now enveloped in a blissful family, which he found quite delightful. In his previous life, Mark had been an orphan, abandoned by his parents as an infant. Had it not been for the kind-hearted matron of the orphanage who raised him, he would likely have perished from starvation in some forgotten corner of the world. How could he have possibly navigated a vibrant yet unremarkable existence over the span of 20 years? After entering the workforce, he often returned to visit the matron, cherishing the moments spent with friends who had grown alongside him. His greatest hope now was that his passing would not bring sorrow to that gentle, kind-hearted woman. He wished for his friends to care for her and for the innocent children who, like him, had faced unfortunate childhoods. Yet, Mark felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the many friends who had shared his upbringing. Some had fared better than he, yet they too possessed a deep sense of appreciation, and he hoped they would look after her in his stead. As these melancholic thoughts washed over him, tears began to flow unbidden. The cries of an infant soon caught the attention of his mother, Clena, who assumed her child was hungry. She tenderly caressed Mark's small face, softly singing a lullaby in an incomprehensible tongue. Gently, she unfastened her clothing to reveal her warm embrace. Mark, momentarily distracted, found himself gazing at the nourishing source so close at hand, a wave of longing surging within him. Simultaneously, a sense of embarrassment arose, for within him resided the mature soul of a 22-year-old. He struggled with the dilemma of whether to partake in this nourishment. On one hand, he was ravenous. On the other, he felt a twinge of shame. However, the pangs of hunger soon triumphed over his modesty. After all, sustenance was paramount, especially when it came from his own mother. Closing his eyes, he resolved to embrace this necessity for his growth and health. He opened his mouth and latched onto her breast, slowly drawing in the milk. The warm liquid quickly filled his belly, and after a brief period of feeding, he sensed the fullness within, prompting him to cease. Perhaps due to his infantile nature, he felt satiated rather swiftly. Clena, sensing her son had eaten his fill, gently comforted him before entrusting him to a nearby maid, who placed Mark back in his cradle. The maid then cradled the adjacent infant, Jorah, and handed him back to Clena. Mark observed for a moment before a wave of drowsiness washed over him. He understood that in this early stage of life, the cycle was predominantly one of eating and sleeping. Thus, the days passed, each one a repetition of the simple joys of infancy. Mark adapted to this new rhythm, reveling in the carefree existence of a baby, smiling daily at his mother and occasionally at his adoptive father. Every day, Mark remains composed, only emitting cries akin to wah-wah when hunger strikes. The people around him have come to understand the rhythm of his calls, which starkly contrasts with his brother beside him. Over the past month, with the strength of his powerful soul, he has begun to grasp a few words. His father, Jo, visits his two sons daily, taking immense joy in witnessing their robust growth. Today marks the occasion of their 1-month celebration, for which their father has organized a modest gathering. The attendance is limited, perhaps due to the small number of guests, yet such matters are of no concern to Mark. As an infant, Mark, possibly due to his formidable spiritual energy, is even sleepier than his brother. During this period, his father sought the counsel of a seasoned elder resembling a doctor, who, after observing Mark's condition, concluded that he is free from ailments, merely more slumberous than other infants. This revelation eased his parents' worries. By the second month, empowered by what appears to be an enhanced spirit, Mark is starting to comprehend their conversations and hears familiar yet foreign names from his mother. He attentively listens, managing to glean some understanding, though not much useful information. The predominant topic revolves around an invasion of Bear Island by an unidentified force, which was successfully repelled under his father's adept leadership, providing solace to his mother. If Mark's understanding is correct, he currently resides on an island in the northwestern part of a region known as the North, and he is aware that his family bears the name Mormont. However, he remains uncertain about his circumstances and hesitant to affirm that he is in a world he recognizes. By the 6th month, Mark finally learns from his parents about their environment, as he has begun to sprout teeth and can articulate simple words such as father and mother, bringing great joy to them. As devoted parents, they frequently share insights about their situation. Their lineage hails from the far northern lands of Westeros, specifically a region known as the North, where an island called Bear Island dominates the Northwest Territory. The Mormont family, of which they are lords, is a vassal to House Stark, the ruling family of the North. His father, Jo Mormont, has a brother named Jorah Mormont. At this moment, Mark realizes he has traversed into a world familiar to him, a realm crafted by the esteemed author George R.R. Martin in his celebrated fantasy saga. A narrative he has not personally read but has heard much about prior to his arrival, even receiving recommendations from friends to watch its adaptation. At that moment, I had only glimpsed a small portion of a cinematic masterpiece, which, according to a friend, had already been significantly abridged. Under the guidance of his companion, Mark had casually viewed the adaptation of this dramatic work, which can only be described as a narrative steeped in intrigue, bloodshed, and violence. His friend lamented that the original essence had been lost, as many scenes had been excised for various reasons. Later, while perusing short videos, Mark encountered snippets of the series, some of which were humorously dubbed the Song of Death and Grass by several of his friends and commenters alike. Having never seen the original version, he was not well versed in its intricacies. He merely approached it as a typical television drama, thus remaining somewhat oblivious to its depths. Despite his limited understanding, he retained a general awareness of the broader world in which he found himself. This realm was imbued with magic, exemplified by dragons and long-gone sorcerers. However, productivity was notably low, reminiscent of a medieval backdrop, where rye and wheat predominated as staple foods, along with potatoes. Reflecting on these memories, perhaps due to the peculiarities of his transmigration, he found his recollection remarkably sharp, forgotten details resurfaced with clarity. Upon contrasting his previous knowledge with his current situation, Mark discerned that he, as an individual, did not exist in this world. The cinematic narrative made no mention of him, nor of his mother, rendering most of the plot lines irrelevant to him. He felt acutely aware that the world he inhabited was a tangible one, and his prior insights gleaned from the film were not necessarily truthful. After all, no matter how exquisitely a book is crafted or how masterfully a film is produced, they can only portray a fraction of humanity's experience. To encompass everything would require an unfathomable volume. Now, he recalled that his father, Gior, had become a Night's Watchman at the Wall, striving for his son Jorah, his younger brother, to inherit his title smoothly upon reaching adulthood. Ultimately, Gior ascended to the role of Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, but met his demise in a rebellion. Meanwhile, his foolish brother Jorah sought to provide an affluent life for his second wife by engaging in the slave trade. Fearing retribution from the then Duke of Stark, his liege lord Eddard, he fled early, taking his wife to the eastern continent to evade punishment. As these thoughts swirled in his mind, Mark contemplated his future plans. Yet his tender age hindered such deliberations. Before long, a wave of drowsiness washed over him, and he quietly succumbed to sleep. Beside him, his mother, Clena, noticing his weariness, began to sing an unknown lullaby, soothing both Mark and his somewhat capricious brother Yora into slumber. It can be said that Mark is indeed fortunate, as he has been reborn into a noble family endowed with some measure of power, granting him a new lease on life. Mark is exceedingly lucky to possess a beautiful family and the prospect of inheriting a title, which brings him immense joy. However, one could also argue that he is unfortunate, for the absence of any extraordinary assistance remains palpable, as this world is rife with countless uncertainties. As the saying goes among the faceless ones of the Academy of Black and White, every mortal must eventually meet their end. The depths of reality may prove even more profound. Numerous tales depicted in films and dramas illustrate this notion abundantly, such as the formidable Night King, the Green Seer, and the Lord of Light, among many others. By the 8th month of his existence, Mark had already begun to stand and walk, articulating simple sentences and phrases with clarity. Upon hearing their son's speech, Mark's parents believed him to be a prodigy, and indeed, the truth of the matter may lie in his extraordinary capacity for memory and learning. Perhaps a gift of his transmigration. He possessed what could be termed a superhuman memory. Childhood is always fleeting. Within his first year, Mark had requested his parents to allow him to sleep alone. Initially, they were reluctant, but as they observed his maturity, they eventually acquiesced to his request. Thus, his inaugural year in this world afforded him the luxury of personal space. Mark could roam freely between the living room and his bedroom, while his younger brother, Jola, exhibited a rather ordinary development, managing to walk only with great effort. Nevertheless, Mark's parents, Joar and Klena, treated both children equally, beaming with pride and joy at their ability to walk. Their profound love for both sons was evident, and witnessing their children flourish brought immense happiness to their hearts. On the first naming day of that year, a grand celebration was held in the evening to honor Mark and Jola. Mark felt an overwhelming sense of joy, as his first birthday also heralded the arrival of the extraordinary assistance he had long desired. Chapter 4. The arrival of the system. Though Count Joar had been preoccupied with the turmoil caused by the Ironborn invasion, he managed to carve out time to attend the naming day celebration for Mark and Jola. The onset of summer had prompted the Ironborn to commence their plundering. While Bear Island is vast, the locales of concentrated population are distinctly apparent, and the defensive capabilities are rather feeble, necessitating the father's direct involvement. One reason for this urgency is the proximity to the land of eternal winter. Should the long night arrive, there would be no resources to draw upon, and the stores accumulated during the summer would be depleted. Consequently, the armament situation is dire, as funds for procuring new equipment are sorely lacking. Additionally, the scarcity of human resources in a world with low productivity makes population a crucial asset. The history of Bear Island is remarkably ancient. Mark learned from his mother that long before the conquerors and the Iron Men seized control, the island was once ruled by a noble family. Over time, the leadership changed hands, eventually falling into the possession of the Mormont family, where it remains to this day. Due to a scarcity of men who ventured out to work, the women took up arms to resist during the invasions and plunders by the Iron Men. It can be said that apart from infants and the elderly, nearly all capable individuals organized to fight back when men went fishing or responded to their lord's summons. The unprotected island relied on its women to muster a defense against the intruders, thus giving rise to the unique warrior culture of Bear Island, a necessity born of survival. The arrival of the system filled Mark with exhilaration, for it offered him a path of opportunity in an island beset by hardships and a lack of resources. The system's arrival opened a new realm of possibilities, promising to aid him in navigating the treacherous environment. Listening to the enchanting voice, he awaited patiently. Congratulations, Master. You have bound the sign-in system, 110-509-9100. As he observed the progress bar gradually increasing, Mark waved his hand with excitement, hoping the system would be of assistance in ensuring his survival amidst danger. Upon the progress bar reaching 100%, he was greeted with a delightful announcement from the system. Congratulations, Master, you have a sign-in opportunity. Would you like to proceed? Congratulations, Master. You have received a novice gift pack. Would you like to open it now? After celebrating his naming day, Mark returned to his room to rest, when a melodious voice echoed in his mind, followed by a series of enchanting sounds, his long-desired auxiliary system. He sprang up from his bed, filled with joy, relieved that he was alone, lest others think him mad. Once he regained his composure, he softly uttered, "System, you have finally arrived. I knew every traveler would possess a system. Master, you need not vocalize your thoughts. You can communicate with me in your mind," replied the system, with its cool voice resonating in Mark's consciousness. He attempted to engage in mental dialogue. "System, what functionalities do you possess?" Is it solely sign-in? The most significant feature is indeed the sign-in function, the system responded. You may sign in daily, weekly, monthly, annually, or even over a century, and upgrades are possible, though they require a decade of continuous sign-ins. Reflecting on the system's requirements for daily sign-ins without the option to accumulate them, Mark inquired with a hint of curiosity. Can you not allow the accumulation of sign-ins over a week or a month, and would that not affect the progression of upgrades? That is indeed possible, the system affirmed. You may also set reminders for daily, weekly, or monthly sign-ins, and after a decade of accumulation, you can sign in and simultaneously upgrade. Mark leaped from his small boat, his face alight with joy as he exclaimed, "System, I adore you. You are truly thoughtful. System, thank you for your recognition, Master. You now have an opportunity to sign in and a novice gift package. Would you like to use them?" Caught up in his excitement, Mark temporarily forgot about the novice gift package and the sign-in opportunity. System, each sign-in may yield different rewards, such as 100 loyal guards, 10 farmers, 100 iron swords, armor, a Valyrian steel longsword, or even 100 gold dragons. The possibilities are endless. According to the system, the least favorable sign-in reward is a gold dragon, while the most coveted might be a dragon egg or other valuable items like Valyrian steel. After all, possessing a formidable ally and indomitable weapons and armor is a remarkable advantage. Not only would he acquire weaponry, but he could also sign in for 100 loyal guards and farmers devoted to him. This seemed tailor-made for Mark. Moreover, this was merely the initial sign-in system, with potential for future upgrades. First, he wiped his hands with a towel hanging nearby, then silently prayed to the revered deities he was familiar with, the Creator God, the Heavenly Sovereign, the Sage, the Jade Emperor, and the Buddha. "I beseech you to bless me with good fortune in my sign-in," he implored, gazing at the wheel before him. "System, commence my first sign-in, and may it bring me a grand surprise." "System, congratulations, Master, on completing your first sign-in. You have obtained 100 loyal guards, possessing the strength of low-tier knights, while the captain wields the might of mid-tier knights. Would you like to extract them now? Additionally, you still have an unopened novice gift package. Shall we open it now?" Mark was astounded that his initial reward was a protective cadre of guards, all with unwavering loyalty. Although he was somewhat perplexed by the distinctions between mid-tier and high-tier knights, he waved his hand in excitement. After the initial thrill subsided, he began to ponder the situation and asked with concern, "System, will the sudden appearance of 10 burly men cause my parents to misunderstand?" "System, do not worry, Master. These individuals will be established as having accompanied you since childhood to protect you. Their presence will be arranged reasonably, with a traceable history, ensuring their 100 loyalty to you." Upon hearing the system's explanation, Mark felt reassured, as it seemed the system had meticulously arranged everything for him. Remembering the novice gift package, he spoke with anticipation, "System, open my novice gift package." "System, the package has been opened. Congratulations, Master, on acquiring the Eye of Insight and the blueprint for a small world. Would you like to use them now?" Mark gazed in astonishment at the rewards. This was no mere novice gift package, but rather an ultimate treasure trove. Upon hearing the system's prompt, he joyfully responded, "Yes, I wish to use them immediately." As soon as he spoke, he felt a tingling sensation in his eyes, followed by a notification from the system. "Master, the Eye of Exploration has been successfully integrated, and the small world has also merged. You can enter or exit this realm simply by mentally invoking it. Furthermore, within this small world, you reign supreme. You possess the power to alter its very fabric at will. Currently, it spans a mere 2 square kilometers, but it has the potential to expand through treasures acquired via sign-ins or by seeking higher powers within this world. This realm comprises 2 distinct segments, one that sustains flora and fauna, and another designated for storage in a state of stasis." As Mark absorbed the system's explanation, he couldn't help but marvel at its capabilities. Truly, it was extraordinary. He felt like the happiest person alive. Who could have imagined that the wonders of his imagination would manifest in reality? He now possessed the means to thrive securely in this world. Upon completing the briefing, Mark promptly summoned his guards. Their arrival was seamless, and as he observed the imposing figures, each towering over 9 meters, he began to experiment with his Eye of Exploration, focusing on the most robust among them, the captain of the squad. A panel materialized, along with a miniature model of the individual. Name: dark lifespan, 40, 200 height, 200 centimeters appearance, well-defined features, brown hair, brown eyes, physique, 39 strength, 40 agility, 35 spirit, 45 realm, intermediate knight loyalty, 100 items, iron sword, dual layer armor, leather and metal. Armored warhorse evaluation, They are the most loyal of guardians, sworn to protect you with their lives. However, they are also flesh and blood, deserving of your kindness. Moreover, the items acquired by the master can be utilized for future enhancements. Mark reviewed the attributes of the remaining individuals. Aside from the captain, the other 9 were lower-tier knights, each equipped with their own armor, mounts, and weapons. This significantly alleviated Mark's concerns regarding their gear. Continuing to delve into the system's functionalities, he learned that upon upgrading, it would transition to an intermediate sign-in system, allowing access to techniques for physical enhancement and a plethora of magical abilities. With confidence, Mark scrutinized the current sign-in page, noting the absence of these advanced items, which would only be attainable after an upgrade. The process of upgrading the signal was not overly tedious, but required a considerable investment of time, necessitating continuous sign-ins from Mark. However, these prospects felt distant and unattainable at this moment. Dismissing such thoughts, Mark found solace in the protection afforded by his 10 guardians, allowing him to finally feel at ease. After a spell of experimenting with his newly acquired eye of exploration, he examined various objects like tables and benches, perceiving their intrinsic essence and composition. Turning his gaze upon himself once more, the panel reappeared, accompanied by a miniature model of his own form. Name: Mark Mormont. Lifespan: 11-20. Height: 100. Appearance: as handsome as the reader before the screen. Constitution: 10 Strength, 10 Agility, 11 Spirit, 40 Realm. An ordinary individual with notably high mental faculties. Subjects: 10 Territory, none items. Prototype of a small world. Mark discovered that apart from his spirit, which stood at an impressive 45 points, 3 times that of an ordinary person, his other attributes merely reflected his health status. His assessment indicated he was an ordinary person with considerably elevated mental prowess, which he acknowledged to be accurate. Furthermore, his height had rapidly surpassed that of most peers, a fortunate outcome of being born into a family that provided ample nutrition. Through meticulous observation, Mark noted several distinctions between his panel and that of his guards, particularly in terms of subjects and territory, devoid of loyalty. The term subjects was easily interpreted, implying allegiance to his guards or farmers, while territory referred to the domain he possessed. At that moment, Mark was in an exuberant state, continuously exploring the functionalities of the system, for these elements would be crucial for his survival and the enhancement of his resources in this world. After a while, a wave of drowsiness overcame him, likely due to his young age. Reluctantly, he closed the page and returned to bed, enveloping himself in his blanket. A sweet smile graced his lips as he quietly drifted into slumber, entering the realm of dreams more swiftly than usual. General overview of power. Given the magical nature of the world, these settings are notably elevated. Note: in a non-magical world, an ordinary person's attributes reaching 10 points signifies a healthy state, while 20 points represents the limit. In this realm, infused with magic, the average attributes of an ordinary person hover around 15 points, indicating that even during this magical downturn, individuals possess physical qualities surpassing those of most ordinary beings in a non-magical world. For instance, an attribute of 1 point equates to possessing 10 kilograms of strength. Thus, individuals in a magical world typically have attributes ranging between 15 to 20, translating to strength levels of 150 to 200 kilograms. Subsequent levels of knights. 1. First Realm, low-tier knight. Trained in the magical world, these knights possess attributes between 20 to 30 points, corresponding to strength levels of 200 to 300 kilograms. Their lifespan ranges from 120 to 150 years. Combat capability. A low-tier knight, equipped with quality leather armor and weaponry, can easily contend with 50 ordinary individuals from this magical realm. 2. Second Realm, mid-tier knight. Mid-tier knights exhibit attributes of 30 to 40 points, with strength levels between 300 to 400 kilograms and a lifespan of around 200 years. Combat capability. With refined leather armor complemented by iron armor for dual protection, a mid-tier knight can single-handedly confront 10 low-tier soldiers or 500 ordinary individuals without sustaining any injuries. 3. Third Realm, high-tier knight. The attributes of a high-tier knight are as follows: 50 points, 400, 500 kilograms of strength, and a lifespan spanning 300 years. Their combat prowess exceeds that of mid-tier knights, augmented by both leather armor and plate armor, while their steeds are also armored. This formidable advantage enables them to effortlessly challenge 10 mid-tier knights or 100 low-tier knights. The attributes of a top-tier knight range between 60, boasting a strength of 500, 600 kilograms and a lifespan of approximately 500 years. Their combat capability is thrice that of an ordinary person. complemented by superior equipment and elite steeds, allowing them to easily vanquish 1,000 low-tier knights. The fifth realm, known as the half-step transcendence, possesses attributes ranging from 60 to 100, signifying city-level destruction. This stage represents a unique, transitional phase in the magical world aspiring towards the extraordinary. Dragons, while existing within this phase, are impervious to blades and possess magical powers. If a human reaches this stage, they can engage in close combat with dragons. Although this realm is steeped in magic, only a select few can attain the extraordinary knight status. Centuries ago, the Valyrians may have reached this half-step transcendence. Presently, there are known entities such as the Night King with ice magic, the Green Prophet who explores timelines, and occasionally manifested beings like the Light King, all of whom may have approached the threshold of the extraordinary, perhaps through magic or strength. Chapter 5. 4 years of existence in the year 258 of the conquest. The early years were destined to be an unquiet long summer. In King's Landing, Aegon V, burdened with an unusually aged body, attended the court meeting. The minister in charge of intelligence delivered grim news. Beneath an apple tree dubbed the Crown Tree, 8 other outlaws and the Blackfire family's Golden Company had reached a clandestine agreement. The aged king sensed the looming specter of war, and the recently pacified realm would plunge once more into conflict with the Blackfires. This reinforced his resolve regarding the hatching of a dragon. Though the long night had passed, the entirety of Westeros remained eerily cold, akin to the chill that filled Aegon V's heart, as if he had yet to emerge from the long night. Upon receiving such dire news, he decisively ordered the Targaryen fleet to closely monitor the movements of the Blackfires while preparing for his own intentions. Mark, system, initiate sign-in. Received. Master. Ding. Congratulations on successful sign-in. You have earned 100 gold coins, 20 silver stags, and 3 sets of leather armor. Securing 100 gold dragons through sign-in is commendable. Yet the leather armor acquired feels even more valuable. The leather armor obtained from the system is indeed a paragon of quality, capable of defending against most blades and the sudden strikes of lesser arrows. Certainly, the notion of hunting dragons with crossbow bolts is rather fanciful. Mark, accustomed to such whims, could not help but reflect on the day's rewards, which were indeed quite commendable. His attendance had been sporadic, fortune varied daily. Yet the mere act of making time for it was already a significant achievement. Mark stretched lazily and donned his sturdy leather coat. The climate of Bear Island, likely due to its peculiar geographical conditions, was gradually warming, albeit at an unusually slow pace. Occasionally, frigid winds laced with the essence of ice magic swept in from the Everfrost, keeping temperatures below freezing. Though his physical prowess had greatly improved, he remained, after all, a mortal. The inhabitants of Bear Island seemed to have forced themselves to adapt to this climate. Those with means wore thick coats fashioned from the pelts of wild beasts, while those less fortunate donned slightly heavier garments. The fields had begun to see rudimentary cultivation, and the sea breezes that swept across Bear Island seemed to promise the dispelling of the cold. The location of the Mormont family was at a port shaped like the curved neck of a swan, with its opening facing southward. This advantageous position not only served as a natural refuge during the long nights, but also as a prime harbor for merchants engaging in fur trade. Traders from the Deepwood Motte or Winterfell, even farther south, brought with them the essential provisions of wine, spices, and salt. In exchange for these goods, they acquired precious furs to sell further south, yielding considerable profits. Thus, the merchants were ever eager, and the port would periodically buzz with lively activity. Though such vibrancy also made it a prime target for iron-born incursions, today was evidently one of those lively intervals, as peculiar dolls and essential provisions were brought in from the south. Yet, at this moment, Mark was attentively absorbing the teachings of Bachelor Jerry, who was instructing both Mark and his brother in various subjects. It was clear that Jorah, sitting beside him, was preoccupied with thoughts elsewhere. Bachelor Jerry, however, refrained from commenting, as their makeshift classroom was a modest room adjacent to the hall, which also served as his bedroom. This space, furnished simply with a small bed, a bookshelf, and a writing desk, had been adapted 2 years prior when Mark expressed his desire to learn, gaining his parents' consent to add 2 small desks, one for himself, and one for Jorah, which had only recently been put to use. Noticing Jorah's inattentiveness, Bachelor Jerry coughed softly twice and remarked that they would conclude their studies for the day. Clearly, Jorah had lost interest, and it was indeed a rare occasion, filled with liveliness. Perhaps the merchants trading furs would return from the citadel with some useful tomes. It would be worth attempting to procure a few. Mark bid farewell to Bachelor Jerry, grasped his brother's hand, and, accompanied by several guards, made his way to the port. Mark possesses a profound understanding of his younger brother's current disposition. After all, Jorah remains quite exuberant, and not everyone shares his thirst for knowledge. His aversion to reading, coupled with a fondness for sticks and similar amusements, is indeed characteristic of childhood. Presently, Jorah's antics have caused quite a commotion in the small town, whether he is fishing in the river or climbing trees to raid bird nests. Of course, Mark occasionally indulges in play with him, relishing the fleeting joys of childhood once more. However, as both Jorah and Mark mature, the elder brother recognizes the necessity of assuming a leadership role. Thus, he has considerably tempered his own exuberance. Moreover, he has begun to guide his brother in studies and martial arts. Today, under special circumstances, he has resolved to allow his brother a day of delightful diversion. Jorah, the port is bustling today. Shall we venture out to join the festivities? Upon hearing this, Jorah's face lit up with excitement, and he eagerly clapped his hands, exclaiming, "Yes, brother, I have longed to go out and play. The daily grind of reading and writing is utterly tedious. It would be far more enjoyable to catch fish in the river." Mark merely smiled, accompanied by his guards, as they strolled through the lively port. At this hour, numerous small to medium-sized vessels had docked, unloading grains, spices, and even iron ore. Lavishly dressed merchants were flanked by their mercenary protectors, who, despite their armor, appeared somewhat lethargic. Mark and Jorah continued their exploration well into the evening, with Mark's guards burdened by a considerable load of books, while his brother clutched an assortment of snacks. Mark had spent nearly 3 gold dragons acquiring a substantial collection of tomes, the majority of which were histories of Westeros and accounts of noble families, essential resources for his understanding of the world, hence his extensive purchases. Early the next morning, Mark dragged his reluctant brother from bed and made their way to Master Jerry's abode to commence their day of learning. Most of Mark's time was dedicated either to studying or training in martial arts under their aunt, Maggie. The growth of both brothers was remarkably rapid. Although they were merely 4 years of age, Mark had already reached a height of 150 centimeters, likely a consequence of their existence in a world of diminishing magic. Jorah, his twin, was not far behind at approximately 140 centimeters. Their family was astounded, believing they had been blessed by the old gods. The two brothers exhibited robust health, their physiques reminiscent of the powerful black bear emblazoned on their family crest. For several months, the brothers had been diligently training in martial arts under the tutelage of their formidable aunt. It must be said that she is a woman of exceptional strength and determination, often displaying a stubbornness regarding certain matters. Yet she holds family honor in the highest esteem, truly a match for the Stark lineage. Perhaps due to her temperament, she frequently finds herself in spirited debates with their father, Geo, often struggling to comprehend some of his decisions. Nonetheless, the sight of her 2 charming nephews invariably softens her demeanor. He would forcibly retract his angry visage, perhaps due to the influence of his 2 brothers, which had significantly diminished the disputes with their father. Moreover, he exhibited remarkable patience and meticulousness while instructing them in martial arts. Mark's current existence can be described as exceedingly comfortable, as he frequently engages in sign-in activities. Over the past 4 years, he has acquired numerous items and a retinue of guards. However, the majority of his sign-in rewards consist of gold dragons, resulting in a veritable hill of wealth within his quarters, amounting to no less than 1 million gold dragons. Additionally, he has amassed a contingent of 320 guards, along with 5 sets of armor crafted from Valyrian steel, complemented by 3 Valyrian steel swords. Although he did not manage to sign in for a dragon egg, Mark feels a pang of regret, yet remains undeterred, having obtained 8 treasures of immense value instead. It is known that only a handful of Valyrian steel artifacts exist across the expanse of Westeros. The Mormont family, as one of the few clans possessing Valyrian steel swords, treats such weapons as cherished heirlooms. The sword named Longclaw, a Valyrian steel longsword, has been passed down for over 5 centuries, reserved solely for the brave and loyal heads of the family. Now, Mark has acquired 8 weapons and armaments that rival Longclaw in worth, a development that is undoubtedly cause for celebration, albeit one he cannot share with others in the immediate future. Furthermore, in terms of equipment, he has gathered enough armaments to equip an army of over 200 soldiers, featuring a dual-layer defense system, a soft leather armor beneath a hardened iron exterior. Fortunately, the guards he assigned and come equipped with such armor, along with finely crafted iron swords, and each guard is also accompanied by a warhorse. When not in combat, they can don only the inner layer of leather armor, which is not only soft and comfortable, but also provides excellent insulation, fitting well with the local climate. However, as an island, Bear Island has yet to fully exploit its resources, resulting in an overall deficiency in weaponry. during their resistance against the iron-born invasions. They primarily resorted to rudimentary weapons such as wooden sticks or pitchforks. Although their family comprises around 13,000 individuals, due to their unique culture, approximately 80 of the able-bodied men and women are capable of combat. The armaments acquired through sign-in are evidently insufficient. Nevertheless, they are more than adequate to re-equip the existing cadre of over 100 guards. Unfortunately, Mark, being still quite young, lacks the opportunity to present these resources. This reality has sparked within him a desire to explore the surrounding environment and resources, and if he could establish his own workshop for weapon production, it would greatly facilitate the utilization of his sign-in rewards. However, through Mark's observations, he has discerned that the current situation is far more intricate than he had initially anticipated. Firstly, there lies the issue of sustenance. It is imperative to achieve self-sufficiency in food production before addressing the need for self-reliance in weaponry and equipment. Through careful observation and comparison over time, Mark deduced that the portrayal of the perilous Great Wall in films, when juxtaposed with the expanse of Sheung Island, suggests that the area of Sheung Island may approximate 300,000 square kilometers. Historical family records indicate that such a vast territory might be inhabited by a mere 20,000 to 30,000 individuals, an exceedingly sparse population, most of whom reside in the mountainous depths of Sheung Island. Should they manage to secure a robust agricultural workforce through systematic recruitment, the potential to augment their family's power significantly, by several multiples, would be within reach. Mark's childhood was indeed vibrant. Despite the scarcity of resources on Sheung Island, the immense landmass hints at untapped treasures possibly concealed beneath the surface, yet remains unexplored. It is rather lamentable that a noble family lacks the means to investigate such a bountiful territory, akin to possessing a mountain of riches without the ability to utilize them. On this particular day, Mark and Jorah concluded their morning studies, and in the afternoon, they were to train in martial arts under the guidance of their aunt. Jorah, pulling Mark by the head, lamented, "Brother, ever since I've begun my scholarly pursuits with Jerry and martial training with our aunt, I scarcely have time to play. I can no longer fish by the river or climb trees to gather bird nests. Every day is filled with tedious learning, and it is quite exasperating." Mark, fully aware of his younger brother's sentiments, recognized that at such a playful age, Jorah would find monotonous study difficult to endure. Thus, he directly addressed Jorah's vulnerability, saying, "Have you forgotten your aspirations before our aunt? You are determined to become a great knight. How can you falter now?" He then urged Jorah to move along, exclaiming, come on. Our aunt has likely been waiting for quite some time." Noticing Jorah's reluctance to budge, as if his feet were rooted to the ground, Mark, while capable of exerting more force, refrained from pushing him further, considering Jorah's young age. Instead, he invoked a sense of dread, speaking slowly. "You wouldn't want our aunt to discover your hesitation, would you? If you delay and end up training for an additional half-hour. Don't say I didn't forewarn you." Jorah, recalling the terrifying consequences of previous instances where he had chosen play over training, shuddered at the thought. On several occasions, he had been compelled by their aunt to endure extra training time, which, while trivial for Mark, proved exhausting for Jorah, who lacked any advantages. Such experiences inevitably cast a shadow on his young psyche. In a flurry, Jorah hurriedly followed Mark, exclaiming, "Brother, wait for me. I promise I won't do it again. Please, don't let our aunt know." As they continued, the two brothers arrived together at the training grounds. Aunt Meiji had long been awaiting their arrival. Wielding a longsword and adorned in a simple yet elegant leather armor, though it could not conceal the aura of iron and blood that surrounded her. Meiji was acutely aware of the distinct personalities of her two nephews. Marcus had always been a source of reassurance since childhood, while Jorah consistently caused her considerable concern. As was customary, she commenced their training with warm-up exercises before demonstrating a series of combat techniques. Although their aunt was not particularly skilled with the sword, her display was impressive enough to leave Marcus and Jorah in awe, their admiration unabated despite having witnessed it numerous times before. Following this, Meiji began to instruct them on their movements. Jorah, though somewhat distracted, felt compelled to focus under Meiji's stern gaze. During their practice, Marcus suddenly realized that his execution of martial techniques had become markedly smoother, as if a peculiar force was coursing through him. He speculated that this might be a reward for his years of diligent training, attributing much of his progress to the embryonic world nestled within his dantian. Since its emergence, his physical development had surpassed that of his peers, endowing him with exceptional physical prowess and insight. As time passed under Meiji's tutelage, both Marcus and Jorah exhibited rapid improvement, their movements growing increasingly adept. Observing their progress filled Meiji with a sense of satisfaction. Soon, their day of training came to a close, and as evening descended, the two brothers returned to the castle, their bodies weary from exertion. Chapter 6. Preparations for the hunt. Year 258 of the conquest, May, Bear Island. Due to his youth, Marcus's 4 years of life had been both fulfilling and uneventful. Each day was consumed by either martial practice or study, rendering time fleeting. The summer sky was brighter than ever, dispelling the chill of the long nights. During this period, Marcus discovered something rather intriguing. The people here possessed an extraordinary strength, akin to that of giants, or perhaps even more formidable. It was commonplace for individuals to effortlessly lift objects weighing around 100 kilograms. Astonishingly, even his younger brother, at merely 4 years old, could easily hoist a 50-kilogram item. Initially, Marcus had believed that his own abilities stemmed from an external enhancement, but he soon realized how mistaken he was. Several children of his own age exhibited similar ease when handling 50 kilograms, their faces untroubled and their breath steady, leaving Marcus to question whether he had somehow wandered into an alien world. If not for his own enhancements, he mused, he might have already lost the will to survive. Under his father's direction, he and 30 other children of similar age regularly engaged in studies and martial training together. It dawned on him that his father intended to cultivate their foundational skills from an early age. After their collective training sessions, the two brothers would often seek additional practice on their own. After their rigorous training in martial arts, Mark and Jorah would inevitably feel exhausted. Yet, they were compelled to endure the relentless encouragement of Bachelor Jerry and Maggie, a testament to the coexistence of suffering and joy. Their parents, equally preoccupied, navigated the myriad affairs of their small town. Despite the bustling nature of their lives, they remained committed to sharing dinner with their children, fostering familial bonds. During these mealtimes, Jerry would occasionally assess their academic progress, offering praise for their diligence, and rewarding both Mark and his brother with a golden dragon as a token of appreciation. Their mother, Clena, wholeheartedly supported her husband's educational endeavors, albeit with a twinge of heartache for the injuries inflicted during training. She occasionally lamented the early start to their martial education. Yet, as a nurturing and wise mother, she recognized the harshness of the world beyond and desired her children to thrive amidst adversity. Thus, she refrained from hindering their pursuits, taking solace in their achievements while simultaneously feeling a pang of empathy. Witnessing their healthy growth, she firmly endorsed their dedication to both martial arts and academics. Each night, she would tenderly apply poultices crafted by Bachelor Jerry to soothe their bruises. Mark would insist on tending to his own wounds, but his mother's steadfast refusal underscored her maternal resolve. Though Clena appeared delicate, she possessed an indomitable spirit characteristic of the women of Bear Island. Mark, reflecting on his own journey since the tender age of 4, felt deeply moved by her care. As an orphan in a past life, he had never experienced such familial affection, and his sense of belonging in this new family grew ever stronger, making him cherish these bonds profoundly. Over the years, Mark and Jorah thrived under Bachelor Jerry's guidance and their aunt's encouragement in martial arts. Gradually, Mark discovered that Bear Island was surrounded by numerous smaller islands, each not as expansive but still significant. While uninhabited, some of these islands boasted dense vegetation, while others appeared to be dormant volcanoes, rich in mineral resources. Bear Island, as the largest, was the only place inhabited, with the rest remaining desolate. The vast, towering forests and extensive terrain of Bear Island held many unexplored areas. Despite their family's roots here for nearly 5 centuries, the intricate landscape and multitude of wild beasts had deterred extensive exploration. Even map-making was conducted by circumnavigating the island by boat. In their family castle, situated approximately a league from the harbor, their lineage is graced by a river that emerges from the depths of the island's valleys, nurturing generations along its banks. Mark often finds himself intrigued by its origin. Yet according to his father, this river gushes forth from a mountain gorge deep within the island, a vital source that has drawn inhabitants to its shores for generations. This river not only sustains their family, but also forms the heart of a quaint town that comprises several surrounding villages. The fertile land along its banks has been fully cultivated, maximizing the use of the surrounding terrain. Additionally, being in proximity to the river's mouth where it meets the sea, most of the local populace possesses a small boat to engage in fishing or hunting in the nearby woodlands, embodying the saying that one eats from the land or the sea. As the largest port on Bear Island, it has become a hub for all the family's vassals. Conveniently located near the forest fortress across the water, facilitating the transport of goods, this rich fishery has sustained their family for generations. However, Due to various internal and external circumstances, the population now hovers around a mere 13,000. Of these, over 6,000 reside within the town, while the rest are scattered along the coastal regions of the island. Despite having over 13,000 people, the scarcity of resources means that their family can only muster a fully armed contingent of 100 professional soldiers, a ratio of approximately 1 soldier for every 130 individuals, which highlights the lamentable state of their productivity. Nevertheless, owing to the unique warrior culture of Bear Island, should the need arise, the entire populace could be mobilized, albeit at a significant cost to their well-being. Food supplies remain relatively sufficient, particularly during the prosperous fishing seasons, ensuring that the populace does not go hungry. The common folk are able to sustain themselves. Yet many struggle to meet their basic needs, having lost their primary support. As the lords of the land, the Mormont family cannot remain indifferent and frequently provides aid to those in need, perhaps due to a combination of underdeveloped productivity and a limited population. Compounded by the occasional incursions of Iron Men, the Mormont family, despite having endured 5 or 6 generations, finds itself with only a modest castle and a few significant structures. Their existence can be described as barely sufficient, yet it surpasses that of many other households. Thus, aside from their principal buildings, such as the family castle, a blacksmith's workshop, and stables, they are fortunate that the island is rich in resources, with stones and timber readily available. Most structures are constructed from a combination of stone and wood, with the family's fence standing out prominently, encircled by wooden palisades. Poverty, however, has its own advantages, fostering a bold spirit among the island's inhabitants, leading them to regard incursions and plunder by Iron Men as a commonplace occurrence. The unique warrior culture of Bear Island has enabled its inhabitants to repel countless invaders, fiercely defending their homeland. The Ironborn hold a deep reverence for the sea, often abandoning their agricultural pursuits. They regard raiding and fishing as the noblest of livelihoods, akin to pirates plundering the wealth of coastal regions, while they deem farming and mining as menial tasks fit for slaves. This sentiment is particularly evident in the saying of House Greyjoy, "The strong take from the weak." The Ironborn resolutely seize every opportunity for plunder. Fully aware of the scarcity of resources on Bear Island, yet small-scale raiders persist in their incursions. Their primary targets lie to the south, particularly the affluent ports of Lannisport and the Riverlands, with raids often focused on the wealthier locales near Winterfell. Early this morning, their father, Count Gior, gathered 50 soldiers to venture deep into the forest for a hunting expedition. Most of the meat gathered from the previous year had already been consumed. This tradition, part of the customs to prepare for the forthcoming long nights, entails organizing numerous guards for a hunt that typically lasts an extended period, usually around 2 weeks, sometimes a week. They often engage in multiple hunts and also venture out to catch schools of fish, with clear divisions of labor. This time, they plan to bring along young Make and Yora, intending for them to witness the intricacies of the hunt, though still quite young at merely 4 years of age. The brothers, as the first and second sons of the Earl of Bear Island, have experienced more than their peers. Make is destined to inherit the title of Earl, while the younger brother will either become a knight, earning land as a reward, or aid his elder brother in his lordly duties. In this feudal society, reminiscent of a medieval world of swords and sorcery, there exists a distinct legal system and a primogeniture inheritance structure. Essentially, as long as the Earl remains capable of managing his lands, the title cannot be directly inherited by the eldest son, for the father is still alive and able to govern. However, should he reach an age where he can no longer move, a letter to his liege lord may permit the direct inheritance of the lands. Additionally, there is the matter of sibling inheritance. In cases where the heir has no offspring, like their father, Gior, presently without a son or daughter, his aunt may inherit the title. This notion echoes the events from a previous tale, where after Yora's flight, their aunt, Meege, took on the lordship. Such an occurrence is unlikely for him now, as it belongs to another world, a divergent branch altered by his arrival. Currently, their aunt not only trains them in martial skills, but also manages the defenses of their small town. Mark followed Jerry, the student, and acquired a wealth of invaluable knowledge, while also documenting some rather absurd and tedious matters. As the saying goes, there is nothing one cannot conceive that others cannot achieve. In the context of the strictly defined inheritance system, which is universally acknowledged across the continent, spouses are permitted to inherit. However, illegitimate children often find themselves at a disadvantage, seldom recognized as heirs unless they are the last remaining members of the family. Of course, possessing sufficient strength allows one to disregard such regulations and establish a personal legal framework. Might often makes right. Mark felt he had digressed. abruptly brought back to reality by a voice. He heard his father proclaim, "Ladies and gentlemen, after the long summer comes the prolonged night, which has now persisted for 4 years. The long night shall undoubtedly endure for an extended period, hence, we must prepare in advance. I shall lead a portion of the guard into the mountains for hunting, while others will venture out to fish at sea. If anyone has objections, let us act accordingly. May we return laden with bounty. Indeed, my lord. May the old gods bless you. May you return with a full haul." The attendees fervently blessed their benevolent lord. Mark's father, Count Gio, not only organized the hunting expedition, but also dispatched the family's few vessels for fishing. As the adage wisely states, one must not place all eggs in a single basket. If the hunting proves unsuccessful, the fishing boats may still yield a catch, providing sustenance in the form of either game or fish, a necessity for survival. Soon, everyone efficiently prepared the necessary supplies. Mark quickly located his father, who was directing the preparations. This time, he intended to bring along several of his own guards. "Father, I wish to take a few of my retainers. You must grant me this request. After all, you know their capabilities are commendable, as does Captain Kara," he insisted, hoping that their presence might prove beneficial in the depths of the mountains. Standing nearby, Captain Kara was well aware that 10 guards were essential to protect Mark. Having engaged in friendly sparring with them, he recognized their skills matched his own and interjected, "My lord, I believe we should consent to Master Mark's proposal. After all, more hands contribute to greater strength. I have fought alongside these individuals and can attest to their prowess as fine warriors." With numerous carnivorous creatures lurking nearby, the most ferocious being the Shadow Mountain Cat, it was indeed prudent to have additional assistance. Gio understood the importance of protecting Mark and Jola with a complement of 10 guards and concurred with Captain Kara's suggestion, believing it wise to bring along extra men. "You make a valid point, Kara. Therefore, Mark, I grant your request. But we must leave a few individuals behind to safeguard the castle and your mother, Clena." Mark found this reasoning sound, realizing that should they all venture out, any unforeseen mishap would lead to a lifetime of regret. "Father, this time I shall take only 5 individuals with me, and I trust that we will reap a bountiful harvest. The old god will surely bless us with an abundance of food reserves this year." Indeed, Mark spoke wisely. The old god would undoubtedly favor us with greater yields. Jiao chuckled heartily, expressing his complete agreement. Ever since childhood, Mark had spared him from worry, and Jiao deemed him the finest heir bestowed upon him by the heavens. He was inclined to acquiesce to most of Mark's requests. At that moment, Mark's mother, Clena, stood nearby, her smile unable to conceal the anxiety in her eyes, which did not go unnoticed by Mark. He approached and, with his petite frame, embraced his mother, his face beaming with a smile as he sought to comfort her. "Mother, there is no need for excessive concern. My brother and I are accompanied by our father and formidable guards. As the offspring of Bear Island, we must learn to adapt to this lifestyle from a young age." Jiao, having noticed his wife Clena's unease, stepped forward to embrace her, whispering words of reassurance in her ear. "Clena, have you forgotten how clever our children are? They will adapt swiftly to life on Bear Island, which is essential for cultivating them into strong knights. Besides, they are under my protection, so you need not worry." Gradually, the furrow of worry in Clena's eyes eased, and she nodded gently. "Jiao, I hope you can safeguard our children. They are but 4 years old, yet as members of an ancient, proud, and honorable lineage, they must learn the skills necessary for survival." A look of guilt crossed Jiao's face, for he understood the hardships of their impoverished island, where women and children bore the weight of life's responsibilities from an early age. Observing Jiao's expression, Clena offered him comfort. "Jiao, there is no need for remorse. Marrying you is my greatest joy. You are a kind and brave warrior and lord. Your protection has afforded our people a better life, and you have done exceptionally well." Maggie refrained from interrupting her brother and sister-in-law, recognizing their deep affection for one another. Though she experienced a flicker of impatience, she remained silent, a rare occurrence. Mark, witnessing the love between his parents, felt compelled to speak, but his younger brother Jorah, lacking the same restraint, chimed in. "Mother, do not worry. Look at us. My brother and I have grown quite strong, and we will adapt well." Mark's parents were momentarily interrupted from their mutual comfort by this unexpected voice. Jiao gently patted Jorah's head, though Mark perceived a hint of reproach in his father's eyes. As if to say, "How could you interrupt our moment?" Jiao turned to his sister Maggie, speaking in an unusually soft tone. "Maggie, while I am away, the defense of the town will rely on you." Maggie gently patted her chest, her expression one of unwavering confidence. "Rest assured, I will ensure you see a thriving town upon your return. You must also take care while venturing into the depths of the forest." Zhao offered her a reassuring glance before addressing the assembled crowd. May we return laden with bounty, and may the old gods bestow their blessings upon us. Observing the expressions of agreement and support among the crowd, he seized the moment to uplift their spirits by reciting the family's ancestral language. Stand tall, everyone present, whether common folk or warriors, solemnly echoed, stand tall. After exchanging heartfelt farewells with numerous guards and loved ones, bolstered by their hopes and encouragement, Mark and his companions finally embarked on their journey into the forest's depths. It was Mark's first time stepping beyond the familiar confines of his village. Filled with curiosity for the world outside. Chapter 7. The heir's instruction. Mark bid farewell to the village he had called home for 4 years, his heart brimming with excitement as he ventured onto a more distant path, eagerly anticipating the journey ahead. Clad in gear of his own making, he wore a layered leather armor crafted from warm and comfortable animal pelts. Topped with an outer layer of steel armor, he had forged himself at the tender age of 3. His education had not been confined to knowledge and martial skills. He had also apprenticed under a master blacksmith hired by his family, learning to research and create weaponry suited to his needs. Though he had received weapons and armor during his training, they were far too large for his small frame. Jola had initially accompanied him out of interest, but like many children, she quickly lost interest and ceased her studies after a few days. As the group prepared their weapons and supplies, they stepped out of the familiar village just as the sun began to rise. Time flowed onward as they ventured deeper into the forest, where the dense canopy obscured the light above. The narrow path was blanketed in decaying leaves and newly fallen, withered foliage, transformed into natural fertilizer. The trees near Bear Island, being close to the land of everlasting winter, bore leaves that were not particularly broad, yet the variety was astonishingly diverse. The jungle here was remarkably straight, with the trunks of towering trees so wide that it would take more than 10 people to encircle them, reaching an impressive height of around 260 feet. Amongst the abundant vegetation, Mark gently touched the trunk of a giant tree, his mind racing with thoughts of the potential tools and ships that could be fashioned from such splendid materials. Moreover, the decomposed leaves on the ground served as excellent natural fertilizer. This place was truly a treasure trove. Beside him, Jorah was evidently captivated and curious about the unfamiliar surroundings. As it was his first venture away from home, he continually surveyed the area, and after a while, seemingly bored, he drew closer to Mark and inquired, "Brother, look at these trees. They are even more majestic than those at the entrance of our town. It would take at least 20 or 30 people to encircle one of them. Moreover, unlike the fishleaf tree at our town's threshold, which possesses a pale, grayish bark and deep red leaves that resemble countless bloodied palms, these trees seem to embody a more traditional essence. They exude a delightful fragrance, unlike the one at our town that bears a terrifying visage carved into its trunk." Mark did not contest this observation, as the verdant trees surrounding them indeed presented a stark contrast to the entrance of their town. However, the fishleaf tree was a revered old god of the ancestors and the children of the forest. Thus, nearly every lord of the north owned one, with the most renowned being the sacred grove of House Stark. Due to their religious significance, the trunks of most fishleaf trees were etched with human faces. Legends spoke of a time when this continent was solely inhabited by the children of the forest, and such trees were abundant in every corner. Yet, when the ancestors crossed the narrow sea, their peculiar shapes led to widespread deforestation by those whose beliefs diverged. To curtail this devastation, the children of the forest attempted to wield magical powers to sever the connection between the north and the south, but their powers fell short, and they failed. This failure precipitated a brutal war that raged for centuries. Eventually, a treaty was forged at the Isle of Faces in the Lake of the Riverlands, resulting in the establishment of an organization known as the Green Men, dedicated to safeguarding the covenant, religious freedom, and the prohibition of further felling of fishleaf trees. Over time, the fishleaf trees in the south dwindled to nearly nothing, while the north retained its faith in the old god represented by these trees. Bear Island, as part of the north, naturally possessed its share of these sacred entities. Mark remarked that their small town was home to many, albeit scattered throughout the area. Whenever a family faced difficulties or insurmountable challenges, they would seek solace beneath the fishleaf tree, praying for guidance from the deities they revered. The faith in the old god represented by the fishleaf tree was deeply ingrained in the very essence of the descendants of the ancestors. Mark gently prodded his brother, saying, "Lower your voice, be wary of Father's wrath. Have you forgotten the last time you secretly climbed the fishleaf tree? I recall how fiercely Father reprimanded you for that. If you haven't learned your lesson, beware of another thrashing." Upon hearing this, Jorah instinctively retracted his head, cautiously observing his surroundings and the father walking ahead. He whispered with a trembling voice to Mark, "Brother, you mustn't tell father about our close friendship. As long as you keep this a secret upon our return, I shall share half of my saved pocket money with you. Let us pretend I never mentioned this, shall we? Is it a deal?" Mark looked at his younger brother with amusement. Since his brother had learned to speak, he had always taken him under his wing. Many of Mark's gestures and speech patterns had been adopted by Jorah. Upon hearing his brother's pained offer to part with his pocket money, Mark could not let such an opportunity slip away. Instantly, he donned a serious demeanor and thumped his chest, declaring, "Rest assured, if your words ring true, as your elder brother, would I ever expose your secrets? Renowned for my discretion, I would never betray our recent conversation. However, you must keep your word, or I shall inform father." Jorah, having just relinquished half of his pocket money, felt quite dejected, his joyful expression fading. Yet Mark knew his brother had the memory of a goldfish, and sure enough, before long, Jorah bounced back, eagerly approaching Mark and asserting, "Brother, I am now a young man. Your words hold weight, but this must remain undisclosed until we return from the hunt. You cannot tell father, especially since you have often reported my misdeeds. As long as this remains a secret, I shall promptly present my pocket money to you upon our return." The motives of the two brothers did not escape the notice of the adults ahead. When the nearby guards glanced their way, Jorah quickly covered his mouth, while Mark feigned ignorance, pretending to be engrossed in his surroundings. However, Mark soon found himself lost in contemplation, pondering whether the people here were unaware of the potential of the land. Why had no one collected the fertile materials strewn beneath the forest floor? It seemed evident that the locals did not utilize such resources. He recalled the rich soil that lay decayed in the woods, if harnessed for agriculture. The yield of crops could increase exponentially. Yet, in his years of observing the fields, Mark had never witnessed these elements during planting nor seen anyone bring them back for use. He couldn't help but wonder if they lacked agricultural aptitude, or perhaps the current populace had yet to recognize the benefits of such soil. Of course, it could also be tied to their present agricultural practices. This quality soil was not solely confined to the depths of the jungle. Beneath the woods at the outskirts of the small town, there exists an abundance of fertile soil, albeit with some variations in its richness. Perhaps, in due time, I shall mention this to his father. The captain of the guard, Kara, noticed Mark intently observing the forest and the earth. Witnessing such a serious demeanor, she couldn't help but softly speak, "My little adult, do you find it wondrous to be out here for the first time? It is akin to embarking on an adventure, brimming with the unknown, naturally accompanied by a sense of tension and exhilaration. In my teenage years, I too was filled with curiosity about the world beyond and had an affinity for adventure." Mark was abruptly pulled from his contemplative state by her unexpected voice. The sudden sound in the serene forest startled him, despite his mature soul. It was indeed his first time delving into such a primal and dense woodland. Humans are inherently awed and apprehensive of the unknown and the rawness of nature. Although he had undergone a year of rigorous training under his aunt, equipping him with strength comparable to that of a low-ranking knight, he was still merely a traveler who had lived in this world for less than 4 years. Moreover, this was his first venture beyond the confines of his immediate surroundings, arousing both thrill and anxiety. Though startled by Kara's sudden interjection, he quickly regained his composure upon recognizing her as his father's captain. With a feigned severity, he remarked, "Sir Kara, speaking so suddenly in such a tranquil environment could frighten someone to death. I would appreciate it if you could refrain from such abruptness in the future. Had it not been for my bravery, I might have been genuinely frightened." Those nearby couldn't help but chuckle softly, their laughter controlled to avoid disturbing the ambience. Geo, walking ahead, also heard the laughter but merely glanced back without sharing their mirth. His voice took on a serious tone as he admonished, "Kara, let us maintain our seriousness. We have entered the depths of the forest. We are not here for leisure. The surrounding woods are a terrifying place that devours the unwary. Have you all forgotten the dangers that lurk within? We should not engage in frivolity here. Let us be vigilant." The group promptly quieted, their demeanor shifting to one of caution as they surveyed their surroundings. Kara, upon receiving her lord's rebuke, displayed no sign of discontent. Instead, she appeared somewhat apprehensive, carefully scanning the area. With a respectful tone, she responded, "I apologize, my lord. I was merely charmed by Mark's adorableness, which led me to tease him. I assure you, there will be no further incidents of this nature." Geo did not chastise her further, yet his expression remained stern. Gently approaching Mark and Yura, he whispered, "My dear children, whenever we venture deep into the forest, we must maintain a reverence for life. The towering trees obscure the light, revealing a shadowy aspect. Thus, We must diligently observe the potential dangers lurking in the darkness. Do you recall the tales I have shared? Our island is home to shadowy bobcats, massive bears, and wild wolves, ferocious beasts that lie in wait, silently anticipating the appearance of their prey. They are masterful hunters, ever poised to deliver a fatal blow. Therefore, we must exercise utmost caution. His words resonated with a profound respect for the forest and a solemn warning for his children. Mark and Yura listened intently. Although they had heard their father's admonitions before, they had never witnessed such gravity in his demeanor. The surrounding guards, too, heeded Yura's caution, heightening their vigilance to the sounds of the wilderness, for the unknown is indeed the most fearsome. Despite their seasoned experience in hunting, their reverence for the forest had never waned. Numerous instances had taught them that those who presumed familiarity with their surroundings often fell victim to their own complacency. Mark, well aware of his father's teachings, recognized that this primal forest undoubtedly harbored many unknown dangers. The solemn expressions of the guards made it clear, within these woods lurked terrifying creatures and hidden threats. It is imperative to approach the forest with awe and caution. As Mark pondered, he remained alert to his surroundings. He couldn't help but recall that within his domain lay 320 warriors ready for summons. The thought of this backup eased his anxious heart, yet he remained vigilant. Being cautious was a responsibility he owed to himself. He had yet to fully appreciate the beauty of this world and carve out his own place within it. He had no desire to perish before his journey had truly begun, for he wished to witness the splendor of Westeros and the free cities of the East. Though young, Yura, typically spirited, now listened earnestly to his father's teachings. His seemingly foolish demeanor belied his intelligence. He was quite perceptive and understood the nuances of right and wrong, seeking to avoid harm. A closer observation would reveal a serious expression etched on his youthful face, attentively absorbing every word. Mark was not surprised by this serious demeanor. He had grown accustomed to it. As the elder brother, he had profoundly influenced his sibling, perhaps serving as a commendable role model. Remarkably, Mark refrained from teasing his brother. The forest was enveloped in silence as the group moved forward quietly, the only sound being the crunch of their feet upon the withered wood. Each individual bore a serious demeanor, tightly gripping their bows, shields, and long swords. Arrows were nocked, bowstrings taut. A cohort hastily navigated through the forest, swiftly entering a valley that was peculiarly tranquil. The guards, seasoned veterans, instinctively sensed the anomaly of their surroundings. Gradually, they began to draw closer together, forming a circular defensive formation. Shield bearers led the front, followed by sword-wielding sentinels, and then the archers, ensuring the utmost protection for the two children, Jorah and Mark. These two were the Lord's sons and the future hope of Bear Island, their safety and obligation and a testament to loyalty. Mark and Jorah were not idle. They brandished miniature short bows, drawing arrows from their quivers and knocking them with a cautious half-draw. Mirroring the vigilance of their experienced guardians, they scanned the vicinity with alertness. Mark noted that since their entrance into the valley, an unsettling silence pervaded the air, suggesting the presence of formidable carnivorous creatures. Each animal possesses its own aura, and such stillness hinted at the lurking of great beasts, perhaps poised to strike from the shadowy recesses surrounding them. At the forefront stood Zhao, his long claws pressed tightly against his body, one hand resting upon the hilt of his sword, already drawn halfway while maintaining silence throughout the motion, a skillful display of control. This weapon, a symbol of his lineage, had been passed down through generations each time a new lord ascended, a legacy nearing a millennium old. Mark had seen and handled it, noting that its blade bore no distinction from his own sword. In fact, the few Valyrian arms he possessed were far more aesthetically pleasing, undoubtedly superior in functionality, for the craftsmanship of the system guaranteed excellence. Mark gazed upon the long sword, its patterns resembling undulating waves etched into the blade. Valyrian steel, renowned as the equal of the ancient Valyrian Empire and its dragons, was imbued with magic during its creation. Legends spoke of the forging of such weapons being intertwined with the great magical dragons, evoking memories of the once magnificent empire upon the Valyrian peninsula, now reduced to ruins. Moreover, swords forged from Valyrian steel do not rust, are lightweight, and remarkably resilient. Mark pondered these thoughts. His right hand instinctively brushed against the dagger at his waist, a recent acquisition from the system's signing-in feature just 2 days prior. Such items, though mere weapons of the system, were undoubtedly superior to conventional blades, rendering any comparison futile. Moreover, the weapons forged from Valyrian steel by the system were remarkably sharper and more lightweight. The dagger he now possessed was particularly well suited to his current stature. In contrast to the bulkier, lengthier one-handed swords, the dagger was far more appropriate for him, especially when compared to the cumbersome two-handed greatsword. Although, with Mark's present strength, wielding these larger weapons would pose little challenge. The sheer height of a sword matched to a person created a disconcerting visual. These larger weapons, despite their lightweight materials, felt awkward in his grasp. After all, drawing a long sword was an endeavor fraught with peril, for by the time one unsheathed it, adversaries would have struck several times. Furthermore, his current height rendered the use of such lengthy weapons impractical. The dagger, however, was petite and exquisitely suited to his needs. With a length barely exceeding 15 inches and a blade measuring 1 foot, its grip spanned approximately 5 inches. Although it was a small blade, it was by no means insignificant for him at this stage. This slender weapon, due to its composition, was both portable and convenient. When Mark set out, he equipped the dagger without hesitation. His father, upon noticing it, exhibited a mix of surprise and astonishment. This was no ordinary blade, but rather one forged from Valyrian steel. With his father's discerning eye, coupled with the family's legacy of weaponry, he could easily deduce the quality of the material. It is worth noting that weapons crafted from Valyrian steel were exceedingly rare across the continent of Westeros, with fewer than a handful in existence. Now, with their family's heirloom alongside his son's possession of this dagger, they could proudly claim ownership of 2 weapons of immense value, a testament to their family's wealth. As Mark prepared for his journey, the moment he revealed the weapon, Yora's eyes widened in admiration. Expressing his desire for the dagger and hoping to possess one of his own, Mark, perceptive to his brother's envy, promised that should he come across another fine blade in the future, he would gladly gift this dagger to him or procure a new one. While reflecting on recent events, Mark remained vigilant, constantly attuned to his surroundings. Suddenly, he noticed his father raise a hand, prompting the group to halt instantly, enveloping the forest in a profound silence. Mark surmised that his father had likely made an important discovery, and as he had anticipated, J. Harry's abruptly came to a stop. It was discovered that lurking in the shadowy corners around them was a group of unknown beasts, seemingly prepared to catch them off guard. Naturally, Zhao would not allow these creatures to succeed. He gestured for the guards, who formed a circle, to draw closer together. The guards, sensing the urgency, heightened their vigilance and slowly moved towards their companions. Suddenly, a rustling sound emanated from 600 feet to their right. In the midst of the formation, a guard armed with a bow, upon receiving a secret command, unhesitatingly loosed a sharp arrow, the sound of its flight echoing through the air. Over a dozen arrows struck the underbrush, yet the rustling persisted. Without delay, another volley of arrows was released, and the previous commotion fell silent. The guards remained steadfast, continuing to draw their bows and shoot. As the guards, who were familiar with one another, drew closer, they simultaneously began to retreat slowly, aiming to create an impenetrable wall. The forest, shrouded in darkness with little light penetrating, became increasingly ominous. Soon, a glimmer caught their eye in the thicket to the right. In the dense undergrowth, pairs of crimson eyes suddenly illuminated the shadows. The group, undeterred by fear, resolutely focused on their task. Abruptly, 5 shadowy lynxes burst forth from the brush on the right. Zhao felt a wave of confusion. After all, how could these solitary creatures gather together? Others shared his bewilderment, yet there was no time for contemplation. They coordinated their movements, swiftly retreating. It soon became apparent that among the 5 lynxes, one was covered in arrows, its body resembling a massive porcupine. Each lynx was impressively large, comparable in size to a warhorse, their muscular frames exuding power and imposing visual impact. The lead lynx, though riddled with arrows, seemed undeterred, striding forward with steady resolve. The others, while slightly smaller, matched its unwavering pace, steadfastly following the lead. Mark and the others remained acutely aware of the shadowy lynxes, with Mark discreetly drawing his dagger, fixated on every movement of the creatures. Chapter 8. The battle with the shadow lynxes. Though the sun shone brightly outside, the dim forest felt eerily cold and foreboding, leaving only the sound of breaths from both sides in the tense atmosphere. The blood-red eyes of the 5 shadow lynxes gazed intently at Mark and his companions, their brightness striking amidst the gloom. The shadowy lynx emanated an aura of chilling malice from its blood-red pupils, its sinewy muscles taut and distinctly defined, poised to pounce and rend Mark and his companions to shreds. They were exceptional hunters, deftly evading arrows while swiftly closing the distance towards Mark's group. Suddenly, they halted, clearly toying with their prey. Despite Mark's entourage numbering nearly 20, including intermediate knights among his guards, the prowess of these shadowy lynxes was no less formidable than that of their knights. Thus, even with the advantage of numbers, they dared not confront these ferocious beasts head-on. From a different vantage point, Mark discerned that the lynxes were slightly more imposing than he had initially imagined, standing at nearly the height of an adult. Around 1.90 meters at the shoulder, their gaping jaws, filled with razor-sharp fangs, could effortlessly cleave a person in two. Although curiosity about the shadowy lynxes stirred within Mark, he was not devoid of trepidation. The sheer size of these creatures commanded a formidable presence. Yet, the thought of his hidden trump card instilled a sense of bravado within him. After their playful antics, the beasts gradually advanced, rendering ordinary arrows nearly ineffective. JL, acutely aware of this shift, drew his longsword, ready to engage in a life-or-death struggle. Aside from 5 individuals who continued loosing arrows at vulnerable spots, most others did not remain idle, brandishing their own swords in preparation for the impending clash. JL fixed his unwavering gaze upon the shadowy lynxes. While the group tightened their defensive formation, the guards discarding their shields. Remembering the lessons imparted to him, JL spoke softly to Mark and Jorah behind him, urging them to remain steadfast. You too must remember, when faced with such large predators, do not show fear. If it is but one, fix your gaze upon its eyes. Summon your courage, and prepare for a fight to the death. However, if confronted by a pack, maintain your resolve. Should they sense your fear, they will not hesitate to leap upon you and tear you apart. If you engage valiantly, your chances of survival are significantly heightened. Of course, these colossal shadowy lynxes typically do not appear in droves. It was likely that they had stumbled upon their lair or that some peculiar circumstance had drawn them together. Mark felt no fear as he gripped his dagger tightly, attentively absorbing JL's counsel. Prepared to engage in battle as his father had advised, he maintained a calm exterior, though the sweat beading in his palms betrayed a hint of his underlying anxiety. Beside them, Jorah, possibly due to sharing the same blood and genes, initially felt a tinge of fear towards these colossal beasts. Yet, upon witnessing his father and brother, he was undoubtedly emboldened, gradually overcoming his trepidation. Gripping the dagger at his waist, his body trembled, but he attentively absorbed the wisdom imparted by his seasoned father. Soon, a shadow lynx, having ventured too close, was struck in the eye by arrows from several archers. It let out a piercing roar, heedless of the pain, charging recklessly towards them. The intense agony seemed to strip it of all perception, rendering it fearlessly relentless. The lead shadow lynx merely observed this scene with an air of calm indifference. Yet the bloodlust in its gaze was unmistakable. The creature shook its body, causing the arrows embedded in its flesh to fall to the ground, revealing only faint traces of crimson on its fur, suggesting an extraordinary resilience against such assaults. Though the arrows were not of the highest quality, they could still reach over 150 meters, and their impact was scarcely a concern for the lynx, which could easily withstand the blows. As the shadow lynx approached, it charged forward with reckless abandon, seemingly oblivious to its surroundings. Just as it neared, the guards on either side thrust their long spears with force, piercing its sides. The tremendous power, combined with inertia, sent the 2 foremost guards tumbling to the ground. Fortunately, clad in rudimentary leather armor, they quickly regained their footing despite landing on the rocky terrain. Seeing the shadow lynx slow down due to the guards' interference, Jo seized the opportunity, raising his long sword and delivering a fierce blow to the creature's neck. The potent force of the Valyrian steel sword sliced through with ease, cleaving the lynx's neck in two as if it were mere tofu. In the fleeting chaos, one beast was vanquished, granting the remaining for a momentary respite. However, the shadow lynx did not grant them leisure. It swiftly launched a lethal counterattack. In a flash, the lead lynx collided with a guard holding a shield, overwhelming him with its immense power and leaving him sprawled on the ground, unconscious. Witnessing the swift downfall of his guard, Jo had no time to check on him and quickly rallied the captain and the stronger guards to slay the leading shadow lynx, proclaiming the family motto, "Stand tall." Yet, they may have overestimated their strength, as the beast clearly held the upper hand in this clash of might. Mark and Jorah, witnessing their comrades charging forth with resolute determination, felt invigorated by the rallying cry of their family's motto. Resolving not to hinder their allies, the 2 brothers stood back to back, daggers in hand, vigilant against the looming threats that surrounded them. Mark keenly observed the tumult of the battlefield, witnessing his father seize an opportunity to strike at the leader of the shadow lynx with a decisive sword thrust, aiming to sever its neck as he had done to the first. However, he had evidently underestimated the creature's prowess. The shadow lynx deftly sidestepped and leapt a full 200 feet away, swiftly turning to deliver a crushing blow to the captain of the guard, Kara, and another soldier, sending them both flying with a single swipe each. At that moment, a sense of fear did not grip Gos' heart. He was fortified by the presence of his 2 children behind him, which provided him no reason to falter. Even in their absence, retreat would not have been an option. His gaze remained fixed upon the formidable beast, as if they were destined for a one-on-one confrontation. Time ticked away, leaving only man and beast in a tense standoff, with Geo and the monstrous creature as the sole survivors on the battlefield. The other beasts had been vanquished through their combined efforts. Yet the guards bore various wounds from the conflict. The beast, drenched in blood, exhibited a feral savagery, its fur stained and rendered grotesque by the crimson splatter. Mark, however, did not fixate on his father's plight. Instead, he surveyed the injured around him, understanding that they could not afford to delay any longer. Each passing moment increased the peril to their lives. Thus, alongside Jorah, he promptly attended to the wounds of the others. Fortunately, his years of study under Scholar Jerry had equipped him with considerable knowledge of first aid, which he now swiftly employed. Without hesitation, Mark retrieved the supplies he had acquired through the registration system, which included various medical necessities for treating wounds, hemostatic agents, bandages, and the like. He immediately commenced the rescue efforts. And once the bandaging was complete, he and Jorah moved the injured to a nearby massive rock wall for support. Mark positioned himself protectively behind Jorah and the others, a gesture that undoubtedly left a profound impression on the guards. After all, as a scion of nobility, Mark's instinct to shield his subjects at such a tender age was commendable. The awake guards could not help but feel genuine gratitude and respect for their young heir. Without the brothers' generous assistance, some may have already met their demise. In unison, they realized that this heir was indeed worthy of their loyalty and protection. The events of that day would be etched into their very souls as a testament of allegiance. At that moment, Mark remained oblivious to those behind him. Even if he had been aware, he would have merely smiled, for earning their loyalty was a splendid boon, enhancing his cause. He possessed the means to gather devoted soldiers by the score through his unique advantages, with no concerns weighing on him. His heart raced in rhythm with the tumult of the battlefield, each sanguine tableau tugging at his spirit. Mark noticed fresh wounds adorning his father Geo, who was valiantly resisting the beast's relentless onslaught. Jiao, utilizing his inherent advantages, deftly maneuvered, while the Shadow Lynx, evidently reluctant to confront him, recalled the grim fate of its companion, felled by Jiao's weapon in a single stroke. Clearly, the defenses of the Shadow Lynx were insufficient to withstand the sharpness of Valyrian steel, prompting it to avoid a direct encounter. Mark could sense his father, Jiao, was showing signs of fatigue, in stark contrast to the seemingly invigorated Shadow Lynx, which appeared intent on exhausting Jiao before launching a lethal assault. Ultimately, Jiao's weariness led to his Valyrian steel longsword being knocked from his grasp by the lynx's razor-sharp claws, which regarded him with a hint of disdain. As it circled twice, preparing to strike, Mark did not hesitate. He immediately sought to divert its attention, ready to summon his guard. His voice pierced the air, a sharp crack reverberating through Mark's consciousness. Jiao's complexion had grown pale, and in that moment, he felt a profound sense of helplessness as he braced for the arrival of death. Then, as if a savior had descended, an unexpected turn of events unfolded. A spear plunged fiercely into the lynx's eye, striking at its most vulnerable point. Chapter 9. A sudden change. A gentle breeze swept through, and Mark gripped his dagger tightly, nervously scanning his surroundings, his palms slick with cold sweat. On the chaotic battlefield, the once fearsome Shadow Lynx lay impaled by the spear, its eye clearly its weakest vulnerability. The immense inertia of the blow sent debris hurtling toward Jiao, who narrowly avoided being struck by executing a forward roll. Rising swiftly, he retrieved his dislodged longsword, scanning the area with vigilance. Mark, equally stunned by the abrupt shift in events, noted that the power of that spear rivaled that of Duncan, the formidable captain of the Royal Guard. It was essential to recognize that the current Royal Guard comprised the most formidable knights from the Seven Kingdoms, each having sworn allegiance to the king, pledging to remain landless and unmarried. Comparing the strength of his own protectors to that of the stranger, Mark discerned that the latter's offensive prowess had already surpassed that of his current guard. This realization tempered Mark's earlier dismissive attitude towards the world, awakening him to the truth that it was a realm teeming with hidden talents. He understood the necessity of humility in this reality. In evaluating the recent attack alongside his father's capabilities, it became evident that Jiao was not as formidable as the individual who had confronted the Shadow Lynx. Jiao, too, recognized the stranger's prowess and quickly approached Mark, his demeanor alert and cautious. Before long, from the depths of the dark forest emerged a group of individuals clad in tattered animal hides, their appearances so disheveled that one could easily mistake them for mere shadows. Jiao's tense posture relaxed slightly, yet he remained vigilant, projecting his voice with authority. I express my deepest gratitude for your assistance. I am Jiamermong, the Lord of Bear Island. Upon my return, I shall surely repay your kindness." The individuals clad in animal hides, however, offered no response, instead parting to create a pathway. The faces of those surrounding him radiated profound respect. From the midst of this assembly emerged a robust middle-aged man. His muscular physique accentuated by striking brown hair and eyes that seemed to pierce through one's very soul. Unlike the others, he donned a simple leather armor. His thick brown locks secured by an unknown thread, and his dark eyes glimmered with a sharp intensity. The mountain folk regarded him with awe, as if he were a deity of war. Mark immediately dismissed the thought, asserting that he must indeed be a war god, possessing such formidable strength akin to that of a top-tier knight. Coupled with exceptional martial skills, he would undoubtedly be a fierce general, a mortal at the pinnacle of power. The middle-aged man scanned the two children behind Jiamermong and the injured guard, his gaze imbued with apparent admiration. As anticipated, he spoke. "I am aware of your status as the Lord of Bear Island. I have previously encountered your father, Jiamermong. Your ascension to his title signifies either his demise or his role as a night watchman. It is impressive to see that you, like your father, possess such a profound sense of honor." Jiamermong felt a wave of surprise wash over him, while Mark and Jorah beside him appeared utterly bewildered. Even in his past life, Mark had never heard of Jiamermong, nor had he ever spoken of him. Upon hearing that the man recognized his father, Jiamermong inclined his head slightly, his demeanor less tense than before, though a weight lingered in his heart as he responded, "Thank you for your kind words. My father indeed ventured to the wall in the land of eternal winter to ensure my smooth succession to the title. I am also deeply grateful for your praise. As a lord and a father, it is my duty to safeguard my people." The middle-aged man appeared unfazed, as if he had heard such sentiments countless times before. After assessing Jiamermong and the injured individuals, he extended an invitation. "I observe that your guards have sustained severe injuries and seem unable to move. Perhaps it would be prudent to seek refuge in my territory for their recovery, especially with the impending darkness, as the forest teems with wild beasts." Jiamermong glanced through the forest gaps at the dimming sky, then at his two sons and the injured guard, before gently nodding in agreement. "Thank you for your generous invitation. The situation is indeed precarious, and I must impose upon you for a while. I hope you do not mind." The middle-aged man chuckled heartily, then quietly instructed the nearby tribesmen. 10 robust tribal members emerged, effortlessly hoisting a guard each onto their backs, some even carrying the game they had hunted. Jiamermong expressed his gratitude once more, to which the middle-aged man waved dismissively, indicating his close friendship with Jiamermong, and introduced himself as Blake, the acquaintance of their grandfather, Jerry, who was also the grandfather of Mark and Jola. Forged a profound friendship with the newly appointed mountain chief during a hunting expedition while he still held the title of Lord. Thus, the relationship between the Mormont family and the mountain folk flourished in harmony, marked by mutual respect and occasional assistance in repelling invasions from the wildlings or ironborn of the north. It was during this initial interaction that Mark became aware of these ancestral matters, albeit with limited understanding. With an insatiable thirst for knowledge, Mark attentively listened to their conversation, uncovering numerous secrets, such as his grandfather, Jerry Mormont, serving as a night's watchman at the wall. It appeared that he had succeeded the former commander, Jack Musgood, who had become complacent in his duties. This succession might have triggered a butterfly effect. The current commander, Mark's grandfather, was not supposed to hold that position. Yet reality unfolded differently. One could argue that the flutter of a butterfly's wings brings about significant change. Mark was not surprised. For even a stone cast into a lake creates ripples. How much more so would a person with extraordinary powers affect a new world? Moreover, the Night's Watch had lost much of its former glory, yet it remained an essential organization, and in the future, Mark might need to engage with them. Knowing that the current commander is his grandfather makes future interactions all the more convenient. Although the ranks of the Night's Watch now comprise a diverse array of individuals from the 7 kingdoms, farmers, debtors, poachers, thieves, and bastards, only a select few hail from noble or titled families. Their grandfathers relinquished their earldoms to serve at the wall, ensuring their sons could inherit their titles. Thus, it seems reasonable that his grandfather, a former earl, ascended to the position of commander due to both his status and voluntary commitment. In Westeros, reputation holds considerable weight. Although the Night's Watch operates under a system of election by the majority, the importance of prestige cannot be overlooked. The composition of the Night's Watch is complex and varied, with some joining out of necessity, having lost in the political struggles within the realm. For instance, King Aegon V's brother, Maegor the Scholar, volunteered to serve at the wall to prevent others from exploiting his identity for rebellion, alongside numerous other examples. Mark shook off his thoughts and turned his eager gaze toward Blake. Observing the inquisitive child before him, Blake generously began to explain, recounting events from many years past. Your grandfather was truly a compassionate, brave, and wise lord, often providing us with essential goods like salt in exchange for our needs. We share a profound alliance. For our clan of mountain dwellers has long united in the face of the threats posed by the wild men, having emerged from the remnants scattered across Bear Island. The demand for our resources is considerable. With the assistance of Count Jerry, we have discovered a self-sustaining salt production site, alleviating our crisis regarding salt, thus forging a deep bond of friendship between us. For nearly 150 years, we have resided together. However, due to the periodic election of a leader and certain internal strife within the tribe, I have been unable to visit Count Jerry. I had intended to bring gifts from our recent hunts, but now, upon seeing your father, I come to understand that it cannot merely be due to death. It is likely that your grandfather has become a night watchman to make way for your father. As the current leader of our tribe, I share this position with our priest, who is of a rather unique nature. The priest has encountered some bodily ailments, and typically, as they near the end of their lives, they select the most spiritually gifted children from the tribe to nurture as the next generation of priests, which requires our assistance in their search, causing some delays. Mark, piqued by curiosity, could not restrain himself from asking, do they possess many magical abilities? Blake, taken aback, first praised Mark's intelligence, then, with pride and agreement, responded, indeed, Mark, you are astute. They are indeed the most extraordinary of individuals. They possess remarkable abilities, such as the power to communicate with animals or to inhabit the bodies of gentler creatures. How incredible! I truly wish I could become someone like that, Mark exclaimed. Blake, observing the youthful naivety in Mark's expression, chose not to diminish his confidence, but rather chuckled heartily, saying, young lad, your intelligence will surely guide you to become the person you aspire to be. He gently patted Mark's head and proceeded towards Mark's father. Mark, reflecting on their conversation regarding the abilities of the priests, felt a flicker of recognition, as if he had encountered such powers before. Suddenly, he remembered a character in a show he had watched. Wasn't there one who could roll their eyes in a peculiar way? He pondered. Could that not be an entity capable of sharing the vision of animals and controlling them? His movements naturally drew the attention of the two conversing ahead. Blake turned to Mark and addressed Jiao, saying, these two must be your children. Indeed, Jiao replied, gesturing toward Mark. This is my eldest son, Mark Mormont, the bravest child I have ever encountered, displaying remarkable composure and leadership at such a young age, along with a compassionate heart. This must be your eldest son, correct? He appears quite tall. Indeed, Blake. This is my eldest son, Mark Mormont, Jiao responded with a beaming smile. Mark bowed respectfully as a younger kin. Blake nodded thoughtfully and then gestured towards Yora, remarking on his exceptional composure, predicting that he would undoubtedly become a valiant warrior in the future. This is my second son, Yora Mormont, he introduced with a smile. Chapter 10. The gathering at Valley Town. The group traversed a winding path before emerging into a breathtaking expanse. Before Mark and his companions lay a scene of thriving prosperity. The valley was interwoven with houses and rice paddies, each element harmoniously coexisting in natural beauty. Soon, they arrived at a modest valley, encircled by rudimentary stone walls of modest height. The walls on three sides stood approximately 20 feet tall, augmented by the natural barriers of the surrounding hills. Constructed atop these hills, the walls were not particularly high. In front of the town, a river served as a barrier, necessitating a higher wall, about 60 feet, adorned with two simple wooden gates. The river, flowing northward, ran contrary to the direction from which they had come. Mark was acutely aware that the river at the entrance originated from a nearby gorge associated with his family, not from the river immediately before them, and its direction was indeed misaligned. He had perused his family's map, which revealed the numerous rivers traversing Bear Island, all nurturing its inhabitants. Blake and his kin, upon witnessing the quaint town nestled within the valley, could not suppress their jubilant cheers. Turning to Jair, they joyfully exclaimed, "Welcome to our homeland, Valley Town." Mark's father, Jair, appeared to be witnessing the town for the first time. In his mind, he compared it to their family estate and found his own family's village and castle rather meager in comparison. "Blake, your Valley Town is truly remarkable. Aside from the steep and somewhat inconvenient roads, it is nothing short of a paradise, a veritable utopia." He had never encountered such beauty, which could rival even the grandeur of Highgarden. Blake's eyes gleamed with pride, for a part of this place was indeed his creation. The admiration reflected in others' eyes filled him with joy, even if he did not fully comprehend what Highgarden was. However, the acknowledgement from others was a gratifying sensation. Indeed, Valley Town is the culmination of generations of toil by our ancestors. This locale not only offers a defense against wild beasts, but also boasts fertile land capable of yielding the sustenance we require. Our forebears recognized this place's potential and settled here, subsequently gathering a multitude of kin to form such a thriving community. Blake then took the lead, turning to the trio behind him and the guard bearing injuries. Hurry along. We must return to the town before darkness falls. The wilderness teems with beasts after nightfall. The crowd nodded in agreement and was quickly ushered inside by their enthusiastic hosts. Mark observed that the buildings in Valley Town were predominantly constructed from wood and stone, utilizing local materials. The walls were meticulously fashioned, resembling exquisite works of art. Within the settlement, plots of land were cultivated with rye, revealing a well-organized layout consisting of residential areas, agricultural zones, and several structures reminiscent of mills, as brawny men frequently entered and exited, seemingly transporting grain. However, with the advantages came certain disadvantages. The sanitary conditions were considerably lacking. Nonetheless, in comparison to some places, it was still vastly improved despite the pervasive odor of sweat, which was tolerable. Mark felt no discomfort. After all, in this era, merely securing enough food was a formidable challenge, let alone maintaining personal hygiene. A luxury reserved for the affluent nobility who would occasionally tidy up for important guests or during festivals. This, indeed, epitomized the stark reality of life in such times. Mark discovered that the valley was impressively expansive, and with prudent planning, the constructed dwellings could accommodate no fewer than 1 million inhabitants. Numerous areas remained uncultivated, with scattered piles of stones. Jeffrey, awestruck by the vastness before him, couldn't help but exclaim that this establishment likely dated back over a century. Observing the populace, he estimated that there were no fewer than several tens of thousands. Blake, overhearing this, politely turned to respond, "Indeed, Count Jeffrey. This settlement has been established for over 150 years, and currently, it is home to approximately 28,000 residents, predominantly young adults. Tragically, many of the elders perished during a recent long night." As he spoke, a wave of sorrow washed over Blake, as if he were reminded of some painful memories, perhaps of lost loved ones. The long night was indeed a terrifying phenomenon, capable of claiming lives with alarming ease. After a moment of reflection, Blake, a robust middle-aged man, quickly regained his composure and continued the discussion. "Due to our proximity to the Everwinter lands, we must contend with extreme seasonal fluctuations. Fortunately, the young adults in our community can hunt to stockpile provisions, allowing us to endure the protracted long night. As we approach the end of the lengthy summer, it is imperative that we prepare ample food supplies. Otherwise, this wretched long night will inevitably claim more lives." Jeffrey, well aware of the brutal realities of seasonal changes, interjected, "Indeed, reports from the Academy indicate that this period will persist for some time, thus necessitating early preparations." As Mark listened to the conversation between the adults, he genuinely grasped the concept of collective strength and felt the harshness of seasonal transitions. He could only acknowledge his fortunate circumstances. Having been born into a noble family and having already endured 2 long nights, now finding himself amidst the warmth of a prolonged summer. However, the long summer would soon yield to the extended night, which is why his father had brought them out to hunt for sustenance to endure the protracted darkness. To be honest, Mark felt an overwhelming envy towards their populace, which was approximately 6 to 7 times that of the Mark family. Most of them were young adults, indicating that if soldiers were to be recruited, there would be at least 10,000 able-bodied youths available for conscription. Yet, the absence of weaponry and equipment posed a significant challenge. Upon entering, he observed the smiles on their faces and envisioned the favorable terrain and environment, suggesting that these individuals lived a carefree existence here, unless some unwise savages or iron men encroached upon their territory. At that point, they would have to resist such invasions. Soon, under Blake's guidance, they arrived at the heart of the territory, where a slightly larger courtyard awaited them. Blake strode ahead, calling out loudly, "Ellie, Ellie." Before long, the door swung open, revealing a woman in her 30s. The unique environment of Bear Island had bestowed upon this woman, named Ellie, a sun-kissed, healthy complexion. Although her striking gold-and-silver hair and the faint purple hue in her eyes were quite noticeable, Mark was taken aback, recognizing the distinctive traits of a Valyrian. Ellie held the hand of a 5 or 6-year-old girl, her short silver hair styled in a small braid, her cheeks flushed with a rosy hue. Before the woman could speak, The girl's melodious voice rang out as she dashed towards Blake. Father, father, you're finally back. I missed you so much. She clung tightly to her father, her little face pressed against his, as if fearing he might vanish. Blake's face lit up with a rare smile, perhaps a testament to the joy of familial bonds. He then turned to his wife, Ellie, speaking softly as if to avoid startling their child. Ellie, today I brought back the son of an old friend. Let us ensure he receives a warm welcome. Could you please make the necessary arrangements? Ellie's demeanor suggested she was a gentle soul, and she nodded before turning to attend to her husband's request. Meanwhile, Jiao and his two sons remained in a state of astonishment. Jiao and Mark understood the significance of the hair and eye color. Yet Jorah seemed more captivated by the girl's charm. Blake stood tall and proud, akin to a victorious rooster, and began introducing his daughter to Jiao and his sons. The little girl nodded in a manner that suggested a budding comprehension, her gaze filled with curiosity directed at Mark. Mark, feeling a wave of embarrassment, awkwardly touched his nose, wishing for a crevice to hide within. Observing his daughter's interest in Mark, Blake suddenly felt an uncomfortable pang, akin to the sensation of his prized cabbage being coveted by another. Jiao, however, wore a pleased expression, having noted the abundance of people in the valley, far surpassing his own subjects. The prospect of a potential union between the two families could elevate the title of the Lord of Bear Island to its rightful status, and he was most eager to witness such a development. Though Blake harbored feelings of jealousy, he could not help but admire the handsome and brave young lad before him. Thus, he refrained from voicing his sentiments and instead turned to his daughter. Clea, would you like to play with these two companions? Clea had longed to frolic with them. Yet out of respect for her father's silence, she remained composed. Upon receiving his inquiry, her little head bobbed eagerly like a spring. Yes, yes. I truly wish to play with them. Gently, Blake set his daughter down. Clea, undeterred by fear, approached with a light-heartedness that showcased her bold spirit. She stood before Mark and chirped, Hello, what is your name? I am Clea. Mark scanned the surroundings and noticed his father, Gio, beaming at him with a smile, compelling him to muster the courage to respond. Hello, I am Mark Mormont. Clea, with her sparkling eyes filled with anticipation, inquired, I have celebrated 5 naming days. How many have you celebrated? Through their brief exchange, Mark discerned that she was quite the social butterfly, leaving him somewhat at a loss, feeling inferior to a mere child. He steadied himself and replied, I have celebrated 4 naming days. Clea, clearly skeptical, circled around Mark, scrutinizing him with curiosity. How come you are taller than me? I have celebrated 1 more naming day than you, yet I find myself a head shorter. Mark felt a twinge of discomfort and offered a dismissive response. Perhaps boys grow faster than girls. Gio nodded in agreement, asserting, Indeed, I believe that is the case. Boys tend to be taller than girls for this reason. Clea, upon hearing Gio's words, rolled her eyes adorably, though it could hardly be described as such, as her purple irises sparkled with mischief. She turned back to Mark and mused, Perhaps you are right. Mark, exasperated by Clea's antics, rubbed his forehead in resignation. Their exchange continued in this manner until the announcement of dinner, which Mark seized as a lifeline, hastily making his way to the grand hall. Chapter 11, An Unexpected Union. The expansive hall, adorned with minimalist elegance, was already filled to capacity. Among the attendees sat Gio, Mark's father, beside Blake. On Blake's other side was an elderly gentleman with hair as white as snow. Despite his visage being etched with wrinkles, his eyes gleamed with a cunning light, casting an inexplicable glow upon Mark, as though he intended to devour him whole. Mark, possessing a keen sense of perception, could readily sense the ill intentions lurking beneath the surface. Rather than retreating, the old man brazenly scrutinized him, as if he were a rare artifact, fully aware that everything lay within his grasp, devoid of any need for concealment. This unnerved Mark, sending prickles of unease across his skin as he felt the weight of a predator's gaze upon him. Blake and Gio conversed in hushed tones, seemingly oblivious to the commotion nearby. When Blake caught sight of his daughter entering with the Mark brothers, his eyes brightened. He promptly raised his hand, gesturing for Mark and his companions to join him at his side. Gio voiced no objection, instead wearing a smile as he regarded Mark. The simultaneous scrutiny from 2 distinct gazes enveloped Mark in an overwhelming sense of malevolence, causing him to shiver involuntarily. In the ancient valley, reminiscent of a utopian paradise, the inhabitants exhibited remarkable unity, a phenomenon Mark witnessed during the evening's banquet. As their leader, Blake, prepared to commence the festivities, many presented their cherished possessions as tokens of goodwill. Mark was astonished by their warm hospitality. Through his father's dialogue with Blake, he gleaned an understanding of the valley's isolation, which explained his father Gio's unfamiliarity with such a place inhabited by so many. This also elucidated the absence of conflict between the two parties, as most wars and frictions stem from excessive communication or profound understanding, often as a diversion from internal strife. After his daughter took a seat beside him, Blake inquired, "Clea, how do you find your time with this boy named Mark? Are you enjoying yourself?" Clea nodded enthusiastically, her face alight with joy. "Playing with him is truly delightful. He tells many stories and knows so much. I adore the tales he shares." At that moment, Gio approached Mark and whispered, "Mark, you have always been quite opinionated since childhood. Now, I wish to ask you, what are your feelings towards this young girl, Clea? Do you like her?" Mark's mind felt as though it had been struck by a heavy object, buzzing with confusion. Several possibilities raced through his thoughts, one in particular striking him: an arranged marriage? A union? But he was still so young. Was he to be bound to such a fate so soon? Though it seemed his father was merely inquiring, it was possible he was already contemplating a betrothal for him with Clea. Despite their brief acquaintance, Mark had gathered a general impression of the charming young girl. How should he articulate it? She was beautiful and endearing, albeit somewhat socially awkward, with a genuinely kind heart, truly a case of beauty both inside and out. Mark noted her comportment was quite refined, a testament to her upbringing. His observations led him to believe these qualities were instilled by her mother, whose every gesture exuded grace and gentility, much like Mark's own mother. Clea was undeniably adorable, and her petite visage hinted that she would blossom into a stunning young woman in the future. Thus, Mark believed that even if it were indeed a political marriage, he would not oppose it, for there was nothing inappropriate about it. Being an admirer of beauty, as long as the aesthetic was satisfactory, Mark would find himself the winner. Moreover, the stature of Clea's father ensured that her dowry would be quite substantial. Setting aside other considerations, the mere fact that the population of nearly 28,000 individuals accompanied the alliance was a tremendous boon. Who would ever complain of an abundance of people? Perhaps, should they remain childless in the future, Clea could inherit the position of the new leader. Ultimately, wouldn't that also belong to him? Furthermore, nurturing her from a young age would be advantageous. Zhao observed his son lost in contemplation and refrained from interrupting or urging him, patiently awaiting his response. "Father, Clea is a kind-hearted, lively, and charming young girl, raised with excellent manners. Should a marriage alliance be necessary, I do not oppose it." Zhao was naturally delighted by this satisfactory reply. "Mark, since you hold Clea in such esteem, that is wonderful. Just moments ago, during my conversation with Blake, I broached the subject of a union. Blake did not express explicit disapproval, but he did mention he would consult his daughter. If she agreed, he would also consent. Hence, I sought your opinion, as our discussion was aimed at gauging your sentiments on the matter. From my past experiences, I suspect Clea likely shares a fondness for you, and your lack of objection bodes well for this endeavor. I believe this affair is destined to succeed." Mark nodded in agreement, recognizing that he stood to lose nothing while gaining a wife and a substantial dowry. Even in the absence of these advantages, he possessed formidable assets that could grant him what others could only dream of in several lifetimes. Thus, the outcome bore little difference for him. Blake had already reached an understanding with his daughter, wearing an expression of both joy and reluctance. However, upon witnessing Clea's exuberant demeanor and then glancing at the young Mark, who exuded an aura of leadership despite his tender age, Blake's years of experience and intuition led him to believe that this young man would surely achieve great things. Moreover, in a short span of time, he had managed to endear himself to his daughter. Although Clea was still very young, she had developed feelings for this boy she had encountered only a few times. Given that his daughter had not opposed, he found no reason to object. Furthermore, Mark was undoubtedly a remarkable catch. The sooner they moved forward, the better. After all, growing up together would foster a deep bond. Nurturing their relationship from childhood would likely yield a profound connection in the future. Their proximity would only serve to enhance their understanding of one another. As two of the most powerful families on Bear Island, one of which was the nominal lord of the entire isle, their union would signify a formidable alliance. Zhao observed that Blake had ceased conversing with his daughter and promptly approached him, saying, "My mischievous son, Mark, holds your daughter in high regard. I believe a union between our families would be a splendid choice. After all, the amalgamation of our two families would indeed be a formidable alliance. What are your thoughts on this matter?" Blake, wearing a troubled expression, replied, "It seems your son has struck quite the bargain. My daughter also enjoys Mark's company immensely. Since neither child has voiced any objections, let us proceed to formalize an engagement. We can observe how the two children feel about each other in the future. If their fondness persists, we shall allow them to wed, fostering their bond. Should their affections wane, We shall leave a degree of flexibility to preserve the harmony between our families. Ultimately, it is for the children to decide. What do you think? Jiao wholeheartedly concurred with this notion, recognizing the potential for future developments. Retaining some latitude seemed wise for both parties. Indeed, I wholeheartedly agree. Let us encourage the children to spend more time together. As summer lingers, I shall frequently venture into the mountains to hunt, and during those times, I trust you will not turn me away. We must gather provisions to prepare for the impending long winter. Moreover, this arrangement will afford the children ample opportunities to meet. You may also bring your child to my castle, where they can interact and nurture their feelings. Upon noticing her father's approving gaze, Clea's face lit up with joy, her eyes narrowing in delight, rendering her exceptionally charming. Blake gently ruffled Clea's hair and turned to Jiao, saying, "Brother Jiao, I shall send several attendants and brave warriors from my tribe to accompany my daughter to your castle. Given the proximity of our locations, a shortcut would only require about a day's journey. However, these shortcuts are not known to outsiders. We will ensure that individuals familiar with the paths from our tribe accompany them. This situation has led to a certain isolation of information. It can be said that you are the second group to visit this place." Jiao nodded in agreement, fully aware that he was unfamiliar with the routes leading to this valley, as his father, Jerry, had never shared that knowledge with him. It was likely that his father intended to minimize interactions between the two communities to reduce potential friction. Since Blake had brought him into this place, he had harbored concerns that the locals might exploit their advantages against the Mormont family. However, it was evident that he had overthought this matter, as his father was acquainted with them. Upon seeing Blake's daughter, Jiao felt a sense of reassurance, understanding that their connection would herald a lasting peace between their families. After all, individuals of the same age often solidify their relationships through matrimonial alliances. Through their conversations, Blake's daughter appeared to harbor a genuine fondness for Mark. Simultaneously, Mark harbored no objections to the prospect of such a union, which ignited in him a vision of familial elevation and prosperity. Blake evidently shared this aspiration, leading to a swift consensus between Blake and Gio, culminating in the swift establishment of their engagement. With the assurance of this commitment, the two young men now resembled brothers, exchanging jovial banter and clinking their glasses incessantly. Despite the union, their affection for their respective children remained unimpeded. They invariably sought their children's opinions before making decisions. For example, Blake first inquired whether his daughter, Clea, was in favor of this arrangement, rather than proceeding without her input. Likewise, Gio initially sought Mark's consent before finalizing matters. Once the engagement was confirmed, the somewhat bored Mark utilized his probing gaze to scrutinize the diverse array of individuals in the hall. When he focused on the attributes of the priest, even his normally composed demeanor faltered, as he was taken aback. His heart skipped several beats, for he had been unaware of the priest's true nature until that moment, revealing him to be an ancient and formidable being. Name: Ghost lifespan, 210. 211 height, 180 centimeters physique, 16 strength, 13 agility, 10 spirit, 170 realm. Ordinary person, high spirit, possessing special abilities, skills, green vision, soul snatching, incomplete. Life healing evaluation, capable of roughly observing the timeline, a somewhat incomplete ancient entity that has forcibly seized two souls. His gaze is remarkably predatory, implying that he has set his sights on you. Please exercise caution, master. Upon reading this unsettling introduction, Mark broke into a cold sweat, feigning calmness as he turned his head away. Chapter 12. The joy of engagement. At the heart of the banquet hall stood an elongated dining table, adorned with a somewhat festive crimson tablecloth and a few pieces of silverware. The sounds of conversation and laughter gradually filled the hall, accompanied by an array of black bread, a small quantity of white bread, and roasted meats crafted from wild beasts. The guests relished the delectable fare and engaged in animated discussions. Midway through the festivities, Blake and Gio finalized the arrangements concerning Clea and Mark. Meanwhile, Mark, still somewhat dazed, contemplated the absurdity of his situation, reflecting that he was merely 4 years old. He cast a glance at the adorable face of the young girl beside him and thought to himself that he would gladly welcome more such chaotic opportunities if fate permitted. Just as Mark was lost in his musings, Blake and Gio rose to their feet. The guests, upon witnessing the fathers of the two main protagonists standing, turned their attention towards them. The guests in the banquet hall collectively ceased their conversations, directing their attention towards the two individuals seated at the head of the table, awaiting their next actions. Observing the sudden stillness, Blake nodded with satisfaction. As the host, he took a moment to gather his thoughts before speaking in a commanding tone. "Allow me to introduce our esteemed guest, the Lord of Bear Island, the current Earl of House Mormont, Jair Mormont. We are most honored by his presence. He continued. Our recent discussions have fostered a mutual admiration, leading us to the decision of a matrimonial alliance between our families. Turning towards Mark and Jorah, he waved them over with a warm smile. Lost in contemplation regarding the earlier encounter, Mark failed to notice the summons, his mind lingering on the unsettling figure he had observed through his probing gaze. The system had alerted him that this priestly specter was not of noble intent, and he was now deliberating on how to address this predicament. The other guests, noticing Mark's deep reflection, exchanged amused glances and gentle shakes of their heads. Jorah, seeing his brother's inattention, nudged Mark to snap him back to reality. Upon regaining his focus, Mark glanced at Jorah, who pointed towards Blake above them, prompting Mark to acknowledge Blake's gesture. With a hint of regret, Mark bowed slightly. The two brothers then turned their gaze towards their father, Jair, who nodded in encouragement. You two, come forward, he beckoned. As the brothers prepared to rise, Clea dashed over and pulled Mark along. Jorah merely shrugged and followed suit. Observing this scene, Blake placed a hand to his forehead, though he understood the circumstances. After all, Mark possessed a face that inspired envy and a maturity beyond his years. It was evident that his daughter had been captivated by him and had taken the initiative. When Mark, Jorah, and Clea reached the front, Blake formally introduced them to the assembly, announcing his intention to betroth his daughter Clea to the heir of Bear Island, Mark. During discussions with Jair, Blake naturally proposed certain conditions. Given Mark's status as heir, Blake did not wish to marry his only daughter to someone of no standing. While he believed Mark would undoubtedly carve out a notable reputation, that would take time. A title by inheritance was far more tangible. Thus, upon reaching an agreement, Jair resolved that upon Mark's coming of age, he would inherit the title of Earl of Bear Island and formalize his engagement to Clea. Blake would integrate his entire tribe under the banner of the Earl of Bear Island, becoming subjects of Mark. Jair readily concurred, recognizing that no sensible individual would forfeit such an opportunity to bolster their family's strength. Under such alluring circumstances, Jiao readily acquiesced to Blake's suggestion. He assured that upon Mark's coming of age, he would request Duke Stark to appoint him as a Night's Watchman at the Wall, thereby enabling Mark to inherit his title. Of course, Mark was oblivious to this arrangement. When he saw his hand suddenly raised by Blake while these words were spoken, he was enveloped in a state of bewilderment and astonishment. Mark pondered that this situation mirrored the events following Yora's marriage. Jiao donned a dark cloak identical to Yora's to ensure a smooth succession for him. No wonder the current scene felt so familiar. Mark realized that everything had returned to its original course, albeit with minor alterations due to his presence. The world's self-adjustment was still contingent upon his insufficient strength. Aware that his plans needed to be executed, he resolved to discuss matters earnestly with his father upon his return. Snapping back to the present, he dismissed those thoughts. At merely 4 years of age, he had many years until adulthood, and even further until the story commenced. For now, he needed only to bide his time. As countless possibilities lay ahead, he cleared his mind and listened intently. Mark observed his father's beaming smile, Yora's expression filled with blessings and a hint of envy, and the joy radiating from his companion, Clea, who could not conceal her delight. Though their interaction was brief, Mark had left an indelible impression on her heart, making this a moment of great happiness for the charming girl. He had also discreetly employed his probing gaze to survey everyone present, discovering that most were genuinely offering their well wishes. Only the old priest cast a sinister shadow, harboring unknown ulterior motives that surely would not bode well. Once Blake concluded his remarks, he gently patted Mark's shoulder, signaling him to speak. Mark, undeterred by stage fright, slightly bowed to the assembly and, with a voice that was both youthful and resonant, began, I am deeply grateful to each of you for witnessing this sacred moment. I, Mark Mormont, sincerely appreciate the blessings bestowed upon me by Lord Blake and all present here, as well as the love and support from my father and brother. From this day forth, I pledge to protect Clea with my very life. I am overjoyed to have won Clea's affection. She is a remarkably lovely, intelligent, kind, and brave young lady, and I thoroughly enjoy our time together. I am equally delighted to forge a betrothal with her. Finally, I extend my heartfelt thanks for everyone's blessings and for being witnesses to this occasion. Upon concluding his speech, Mark offered another courteous bow. At the behest of his future father-in-law, he took his seat beside his young betrothed. Although Clea was still too young to grasp the essence of romance, it was evident that she, too, was captivated by the charm of this boy, who was a year her junior, and delighted in the stories he recounted. Thus, hearing praise from someone she admired brought her immense joy. The radiant smile adorning Clea's face infused the entire banquet with a joyous atmosphere. Claia's mother observed her young son-in-law with satisfaction. Despite their brief acquaintance, she discerned a distinct aura about Mark. Naturally, she was pleased with her husband's choice for their daughter, which was reflected in her gentle smile as she watched Mark engage in conversation with Claia. The guests were continuously cheering, their voices filled with blessings for the couple. After the introductions, Blake encouraged everyone to continue celebrating this historic evening. Claia, seated beside Mark, seemed unable to contain her excitement and immediately struck up a conversation as soon as he sat down. As the banquet approached its conclusion, Claia's mother, Elia, spoke softly with a warm smile, saying, "Mark, I entrust Claia to you from this day forward. She can be a bit willful and mischievous. I hope you will embrace these minor flaws. Of course, she also possesses many admirable qualities, just as you mentioned earlier, kind, lively, and charming. Therefore, I hope that, regardless of how long you journey together, you will support and trust one another, facing future challenges side by side. I sincerely wish for your enduring happiness." Upon hearing her mother's gentle acknowledgement of her quirks, Claia's little face reflected her discontent. However, as she absorbed the subsequent praises, her expression brightened like sunshine after rain, blossoming into a radiant smile. Mark, observing Claia's shifting emotions, felt the authenticity with which she presented herself in his presence, a testament to her trust and innocence. As he reminisced about their time together, he was gently pulled back to the present by his mother-in-law's voice. Upon regaining his focus, he responded to her inquiry with honesty, sharing his most genuine thoughts. "Rest assured, madam, Claia is simply spirited, and I truly appreciate her vivaciousness. As I mentioned earlier, I vow to protect her with my life. This is my promise." Claia, her head tilted and a smile gracing her face, felt a surge of sweetness from Mark's heartfelt response. Elia, too, recognized Mark's maturity exceeded her expectations, allowing her to feel confident in trusting her daughter to him. During their lively conversation, they also inquired about Mark's family. He readily shared that he had an aunt and a mother at home, along with a kind and knowledgeable old scholar who guided him. With utmost sincerity, Mark declared, "Claia is so lively and delightful. My mother, aunt, and old scholar Jerry will surely adore this intelligent and kind-hearted Claia." Claia's face flushed with embarrassment, deep within her heart. She felt that Mark was the prince of her dreams. Meanwhile, her mother, Aya, could not resist teasing Claia, remarking on how her lively and mischievous daughter had learned to feel shy. This clearly indicated that the young girl had developed a fondness for a boy. "I assure you, my dear daughter, I shall ensure that you and your little fiancé will soon meet the future mother-in-law of the little girl." Claia, feeling somewhat anxious, fidgeted with her hands, unusually refraining from contradicting her mother's words. Her small hands found no place to rest, constantly tugging at her clothing. Mark noticed Claia's embarrassment and her restless hands, gently taking hold of her small, warm hand and softly reassuring her. "Claia, do not worry. My mother will surely adore you. She, like yours, is a gentle and kind-hearted woman. Your return with me will undoubtedly bring her immense joy." Just as the three were engaged in their conversation, Blake abruptly announced that he had matters to discuss with Mark. Understanding that it likely pertained to the priest, Mark followed Blake without hesitation. At this moment, he felt no fear. No matter what transpired, he could face it with resolve, bolstered by his confidence. Chapter 13. Generous fulfillment of Mark trailed behind Blake, navigating through a series of turns until they arrived at a secluded room. Inside, he found his father and an elderly figure with graying hair, a face etched with wrinkles, and a hunched posture, an appearance that belied a cunning glint in his eyes. It was evident that Gio and Blake had reached some form of agreement, one of which likely involved becoming the successor to this malevolent and crafty elder. As ordinary individuals, Gio and Blake could not possibly fathom the ulterior motives of this aberrant priest. Both had likely heard of magic, but had never truly encountered it. Upon entering, Mark surveyed the cold room. Although the atmosphere was frigid, his father and Uncle Blake seemed oblivious to it, perhaps attributing the chill to the environment itself. What they did not realize was that the discomfort stemmed from the sinister presence of the old man, whose malevolent intentions were not merely superficial. It was likely that the ritual site had already been prepared, causing the surrounding environment to shift. Mark understood that this individual was not to be trifled with. However, in this world, the notion of possession was scarcely known. Few were aware of it. Had his father and uncle known, they would undoubtedly have prevented him from entering. The old man before them was likely already a mere shell of his former self, having long since returned to the embrace of their deity. At that moment, the old man's heart raced with excitement, trembling visibly, clearly stirred by Mark's potential. I fear that the old man can hardly contain his impatience, having undoubtedly concocted his plans countless times in his mind. It is evident that Jiao and Blake remain oblivious to the intricate schemes of this wanderer. This old man has likely deceived not only the two of them, but perhaps even the entire tribe of Valley Town for nearly 2 centuries regarding the matter of the successor. Each time he weaves his deceit, it is in pursuit of a vessel that can accommodate his soul. Yet, the townsfolk, unable to withstand his manipulations, have become utterly ensnared in his web of trickery. Fortunately, our beloved envoy Mark has made a grand entrance, having prepared himself beforehand. As a prudent individual, he understands that one must remain vigilant to prolong one's existence. Thus, prior to this encounter, Mark consulted the system to inquire whether he could gain an advantage, enabling him to retaliate and extinguish the soul of the specter during its attempt to seize his body. At that time, the system, in its benevolence, readily responded that it would require only the offerings accrued from a month's worth of sign-ins. Furthermore, it would assist him in completely obliterating the soul that sought to usurp Mark's being, while also granting him the knowledge contained within that soul. Naturally, Mark agreed without hesitation. The prospect of acquiring knowledge alongside preserving his own life was an irresistible bargain. Although it seemed that a month's worth of resources would be expended, Mark perceived this transaction as a worthwhile investment. Despite his disdain for the old man, the potential acquisition of the specter's knowledge represented a significant boon. The preservation of his life made the arrangement all the more appealing. At that moment, he silently repeated to himself, "I am a good person, I am a good person," viewing his actions as a righteous endeavor deserving of recompense. A harmonious existence for all. The specter, growing increasingly impatient, was clearly eager to seize Mark. His face bore no expression, yet the tremor in his voice betrayed his intentions. "Esteemed gentlemen, my time is running short. To have found such an exceptional successor in young Mark, I deem myself fortunate to be graced by the old gods. It is imperative that I hasten the process of allowing Lord Jiao's son Mark to inherit my abilities. I can no longer endure for long. As long as he can inherit my powers, it will be a momentous occasion, benefiting not only the continuation of the priesthood in Valley Town, but also the unity of the entire Bear Island. Let us commence without delay." Jiao and Blake nodded earnestly, evidently swayed by his words. The latter part of the statement profoundly resonated with them both. The prospect of someone inheriting the priest's powers while simultaneously unifying Bear Island was an advantageous development for both Valley Town and the Mormon family. Without hesitation, they nodded in agreement and softly spoke to Mark, "You need not worry excessively. Simply consider it a brief slumber, and you shall awaken with extraordinary abilities. This is our opportunity for the ascendance of Bear Island." Mark nodded in agreement. His visit was not solely for the sake of the ghost's memories. He had already contemplated that in the near future, when he would unleash some of his own thoughts and abilities, he could find a suitable excuse. Moreover, with the assurance of the system and its backing, this old fool evidently posed no threat to him. Patience was essential now, for the sake of his future plans. Mark felt elated. In his view, this was an opportunity. The overwhelming fortune that had descended upon him was truly irresistible, a serendipitous windfall. Why not seize the moment? "I understand. Father, I shall comply with the arrangements of this esteemed priest. Please bear with us for a moment." After their conversation concluded, the two exited the room and waited outside. As they left one after the other, the ghost hastily extended his withered hand to touch Mark's body. Struggling against his nausea, Mark did not feel fear, but the revulsion was unbearable. He fixed his gaze upon the ghost and directly inquired, "Esteemed priest, what must I do? Let us commence without delay. Do not keep my father and the others waiting." The ghost could not help but think, "Since you are so eager to meet your demise, I shall not hold back." Such a perfect physique is truly a blessing from the divine. He had already succumbed to fantasies, envisioning his ascent to greater heights. This old fool was daydreaming of his success, his heart erupting with maniacal laughter. Truly, the ancient gods were kind to him, bestowing such a magnificent and promising vessel upon him as his life reached its twilight. His eyes incessantly scanned Mark, his mind echoing, "Perfect, utterly perfect." Mark observed quietly. The old fool was evidently restless, eagerly proclaiming, "Let us begin. Lie down on the bed beside you, and from here on out, leave everything to me. No matter what occurs, do not be afraid, for this is a necessary process." Although Mark easily perceived the peculiarity in his gaze, he refrained from exposing him and instead acquiesced to his wishes. He lay down on the small bed beside him, yet at that moment, his mind could not help but ponder, "Let you revel for a while. We shall see how you conclude this." The ghost commenced his actions, first arranging a bizarre shape beside the bed, then retrieving an animal organ that resembled a heart. Following that, he pulled out a box from under the bed, from which he extracted an irregularly shaped iron block the size of a human skull. Mark merely cast a cursory glance, but the wavy patterns were arranged with remarkable precision, clearly indicating that this was no ordinary object. Mark scrutinized closely, keenly observing until he discerned that it was none other than the renowned magical creation, Valyrian steel. Internally, Mark mused, "This is a sheer waste of divine resources. Such a substantial piece of Valyrian steel is truly a waste in his hands." The specter gently placed the Valyrian steel in the direction of Mark's bedside, alongside an object reminiscent of an animal's organ. Then, in hushed tones, he commenced an incantation. A series of incomprehensible chants that echoed like a mournful wail. As if in a trance, he recited the arcane words that Mark could not decipher. Before long, Mark felt an inexplicable tug, and upon opening his eyes, he found himself enveloped in darkness. Possessing an advantage that shielded him from fear, Mark remained unfazed by the eerie surroundings. Just as his impatience peaked, a plume of black smoke emerged, gradually coalescing into the form of the very specter he had seen earlier. The ghostly priest, sensing the impending success of his dark ritual, began to mock Mark brazenly. "Brave little soul, are you? Fear not, for I shall take your place in this world. Imagine your splendid physique, envision the life that awaits you, and your unwed fiancée, she shall be mine, all mine. Ha ha ha. Rest assured, I will live on in your stead, propelling your lineage to greatness. Even the Iron Throne may not be beyond my reach. Your soul's essence is exquisite. I can already perceive its irreplaceable fragrance." He erupted into a fit of manic laughter, casting a scornful gaze upon Mark, convinced that everything was under his control. Yet, Mark observed this spectacle with a serene expression, shaking his head in silent disbelief at the sheer madness before him. With such a lack of composure, one wonders if the past 2 centuries have been in vain. Did he not realize that villains often meet their demise through their own verbosity? Mark remained nonchalant, watching with quiet anticipation for the moment to unveil a surprise that would catch the specter off guard. The ghost, taken aback by Mark's calm demeanor, was riddled with confusion. His inner thoughts questioned the script. Why was this person unfazed? He recalled how the previous host had reacted in abject terror, wailing as though facing a nemesis. Yet here was Mark, exhibiting tranquility with a hint of mockery, as if watching a petulant clown perform. An unsettling feeling crept over the specter. "Child, are you not afraid? You shall vanish forever. Does that not terrify you? Or have you already soiled yourself? Have you become mute?" Mark regarded the old wretch, who was ranting as if in a mad soliloquy, evidently oblivious to the adage that villains perish through their incessant prattle. He found the situation oddly fitting. As the specter appeared increasingly foolish, with a plan forming in his mind, Mark resolved to teach him a lesson in humanity. Once the specter quieted, Mark casually remarked, "Fear? Why should I be afraid? Would I fear a dying man? Should I fear a treacherous soul? Today, old wretch, I shall make you understand. What does it mean that there are always greater beings beyond humanity and greater realms beyond the heavens?" Mark admired the audacity of his opponent, who was nothing short of a madman. With just a few simple words, the ancient specter was already enraged, baring its teeth and speaking with a sinister glare. "You are quite the silver-tongued youth, remarkably eloquent. Yet, I find it rather appealing. However, we have wasted enough time. It is time for you to render your service. The great old god's emissary will not remember the perfect vessel you provide him. Go forth with peace." The specter extended its claws, which swiftly morphed into a swirling mass of black shadows, enveloping Mark. Quietly, Mark thought, "The system is watching your performance. You cannot afford to fail, or my life may be forfeit." It seemed the system had heard his silent plea, responding from the depths of his mind. "Master, do not worry. I am 100% capable of subduing this so-called specter." The system's voice echoed within Mark, leading him to realize that he had perhaps overestimated his foe. With such a lackluster opponent, a mere fraction of my strength would suffice to overcome him. Mark felt indifferent. After all, it was merely a month's worth of rewards from signing in, not a complete reset of his progress. He sensed that his system had developed quite the penchant for witty banter, becoming the next master of bravado. The specter, sensing its inability to seize Mark's body, wore a perplexed and horrified expression as it gazed upon the unbroken soul of Mark. Just as self-doubt began to creep in, an inexplicable fire ignited amidst the black mist surrounding it. The ancient specter watched in terror as the nameless flames drew closer, and upon contact with the fire, a heart-wrenching scream erupted. At that moment, it never fathomed that it would meet its demise. Fragmented cries reached Mark's ears. "You are treacherous. How dare you deceive me?" As the specter neared its fiery end, it suddenly yielded, pleading for mercy. "I beg you, spare me. I have yet to live enough. I can serve you, teach you much about sorcery. Please, spare me." Mark's soul observed as the spectre's essence gradually dissipated, feeling an unsettling calm within. The screams soon faded into silence, and the black mist was entirely consumed by the nameless flames. Mark gazed at the now empty space and casually remarked, "You wish to teach me sorcery? Setting aside whether you would actually impart your knowledge, your trustworthiness is in question, having already attempted to usurp a body twice. You deserve to be scorched by the flames. Moreover, with my system, your knowledge is but a mere embellishment to my already formidable prowess." Chapter 14. Abundant harvest. Mark's once tense heart gradually relaxed. However, he found himself captivated by the silvery glow floating before him. He recalled some energy from the cultivation novels he had read, a type of soul energy. He wondered if it was indeed the kind he imagined. Initially, he utilized his eye of insight to investigate, yet he could discern little, as it merely revealed energy. The exact nature of the essence remained ambiguous, prompting Mark to place his hopes in the system and promptly inquire about it. System. Could these entities be the fabled soul energy? He pondered. Uncertain, he questioned his ability to utilize it. The system's voice resonated in his mind, affirming, "Indeed, Master. Your speculation is not misplaced. This is the purest form of soul energy, and I have meticulously eliminated all impurities from it. What remains is truly one of a kind. Such an opportunity may not arise again." After removing the negative emotions and detrimental information associated with the soul energy, only the knowledge of magic and its applications remain intact. Once you integrate this with yourself, you shall acquire invaluable insights without any adverse effects. Mark regarded the shimmering silver light with confidence, rather than absorbing it directly. He stroked his chin thoughtfully and remarked, "I intend to establish a fishing enforcement operation in the future. However, upon reflection, not everyone is as impulsive as that fool who rushed in here and ultimately sealed his own fate, inadvertently benefiting me. Yet, if it were not for his luck, others would likely meet a far grimmer end. Without the existence of a system akin to a sign-in feature, this old gang would have undoubtedly succeeded." A shiver ran down Mark's spine at this thought. The system's voice interjected, "Indeed, Master, your fortune is exceptional to have encountered such a situation. Should a more formidable opponent arise, it may pose a significant challenge. Given that we inhabit a magical realm, I, too, possess certain limitations. At times, I may be unable to assist you, so please remain aware of this." Mark understood the wisdom in heeding the counsel of others, especially in unfamiliar territories. Emerging from the pitch-black void, Mark felt an overwhelming sense of discomfort in his divine sea space. Though it was his own, its oppressive darkness rendered it lifeless and solitary, enveloping him in a profound sense of loneliness. As Mark vanished from his divine sea, the slumbering figure of Mark outside suddenly opened his eyes, awakening with a deep inhalation followed by an exhalation. He glanced at the lifeless form of the ghostly elder sprawled on the ground. A sigh escaped his lips as he reflected, "What a noble soul, and now what of him? He has lost even the chance to become a spirit. Should I consider this fortunate or unfortunate?" Meanwhile, Blake and his companion, awaiting outside, had recently heard some commotion from within. However, recalling the ghost's instructions, they refrained from taking action. Prior to this, the ghost had resorted to manipulation and platitudes to ensure a smooth operation. Now, it appeared that he had been outsmarted and met his demise. Had Blake and his companion not been so easily swayed, there was a possibility that the deceased ghost might have survived had they interrupted at that critical moment. However, granting him an opportunity proves futile. One can only attribute this to his own shortcomings. It may be a matter of timing rather than a lack of potential. Everything appears to be guided by an unseen force. Of course, Mark is an exception, a man equipped with extraordinary abilities. He stands apart from the mundane. Initially, he harnessed the silver energy residing in his mind, which he sensed with an uncanny awareness. Upon utilizing this energy, his thoughts expanded significantly, his intellect sharpened. Memories that once eluded him gradually resurfaced, accompanied by a wealth of knowledge regarding the abilities and applications of shapeshifters. He discovered insights about possessing various creatures, with detailed accounts available. The potency of such abilities correlates with one's mental strength. The stronger the spirit, the mightier the animal or beast one could command. A deficiency in mental fortitude could lead to a perilous loss of self when overly reliant on animal forms. Simultaneously, this elderly figure possessed the rare gift of the green vision, which Mark naturally inherited. This skill allowed one to observe fragments of time based on the strength of their mental capacity. Clearly, this old man was far less adept than the three-eyed raven, as his observations were limited to a small spatial segment of time. Prolonged use of this skill could also result in a disorienting loss of self, again proportional to one's mental strength. Soon, Mark unearthed a particularly beneficial spell related to stasis and growth, aptly termed life magic. This magic could heal and stimulate the growth of plants, proving immensely useful for him, especially since he was no longer alone. After organizing the knowledge in his mind, he activated his Eye of Insight to examine himself. A rather simplistic projection materialized before him. Name: Mark Mormont. Lifespan: 41-25. Height: 153. Appearance: as handsome as the reader before the screen. Physique: 20 strength, 20 agility, 20 mentality, 50 realm. Low tier knight with high mental strength. Subjects: 350. Territory: none. Skills: green vision. Possession: life healing, growth items. Prototype of a small world: 1 dagger, 2 Valyrian steel longswords, 300 iron and leather armor. Through years of diligent training, he had attained the prowess of a seasoned warrior, yet he still fell short of becoming an elite knight and needed to strive further. Mark closed the projection before him and took a deep breath, recalling that Blake and his father were anxiously waiting outside. He glanced at the mess left by that old scoundrel, and with a generous spirit, he chose not to dwell on the past, pinching his arm to feign sorrow. Then, with a slightly trembling voice, he softly called to the door, "Father, Lord Blake, I am ready. You may enter." Upon entering, Jiao was the first to notice the priest lying motionless on the ground. Although the two of them had heard the commotion moments earlier, they had refrained from investigating. As the leader of the mountain folk, Blake was taken aback to see the once revered priest now sprawled on the earth. For a moment, he was at a loss. Regaining his composure, Blake promptly approached and attempted to lift the priest, checking for signs of life. He quickly discerned that the body had grown cold. Devoid of breath and heartbeat, death was unmistakably confirmed. Blake recalled the priest's earlier words, recognizing that the elder priests, upon finding their successors, inevitably faced their own demise. Thus, he set aside his sorrowful emotions and regarded Mark with concern, offering words of solace. "Mark, you need not blame yourself. This is the priestess' destiny. The moment they identify their heir, their death is preordained. They perceive this merely as a return to the embrace of the old gods." Mark nodded gently, feigning composure, while internally he scoffed at the notion. This old man had caused misfortune for several children before. It seemed he had finally met his match. Jiao, observing quietly from the side, remained focused on his son Mark, who appeared merely fatigued, showing no signs of distress. Mark's theatrical display reminded Jiao of the past, bringing a smile to his lips and a sense of relief to his heart. Though he had never witnessed a shaman firsthand, he had heard tales of their enigmatic nature. Initially, Jiao felt profound inner conflict, but he soon resolved to trust Mark with the inheritance, recalling his son's innate cleverness. As a member of an ancient family steeped in honor and knightly virtues, Jiao naturally desired for his lineage to flourish and for his son to grow stronger. It was through Blake's persuasion and grand visions that Jiao was ultimately swayed to accept Mark as the successor. Jiao had always harbored a wary attitude towards such mysterious matters, given the dubious reputation surrounding these figures. As he looked upon his unscathed son, he felt a sense of relief, as if a burden had been lifted. The ordeal was behind them. Unbeknownst to Mark, had he been aware of his father's thoughts, he might have quipped that it was fortunate his son possessed a hidden advantage, or he would have truly perished. This was knowledge Mark was unaware of. Blake swiftly organized the tribe's members to gather timber, transporting the priest's body to a spacious area resembling a square. He brought Mark along, addressing the gathered crowd, proclaiming that Mark had inherited the priest's abilities. Now, the old priest has returned to the old god's embrace, but he has left behind his legacy, passing it to the young man beside me, Mark. He shall henceforth be our tribe's priest, and my son-in-law. I hope you will support and cherish him as you did the old priest." The murmurs among the crowd subsided as they absorbed his words. After all, the miracles of the ancient priest had been displayed before them. Initially, they mourned the priest's passing. However, upon learning that Mark had become the new priest, their sorrow dissipated. Mark, a successor. The attendees naturally rejoiced, their cheers resounding through the air. They lifted Mark high, and he found himself bemused by the abrupt turn of events. It must be said that the thought processes of these people were indeed unique. Blake waited for a moment before calling out loudly, "My kin, please quiet down. Today marks the joyous occasion of the new priest's engagement to my daughter. Thus, matters concerning the late priest shall be addressed tomorrow. I trust you will understand this, dear kin." The crowd immediately bowed in agreement, and Mark, observing this scene, thought to himself, "Who says these people lack wisdom? They indeed weigh their options, choosing life over death. Is this not a form of wisdom in itself?" Chapter 15. The return of the hunt. In the days that followed, Mark adapted to the magic he had learned from the priest. As he was currently in a phase of low magical energy, he had only mastered a few simple healing spells and growth magic. During this time, Mark either played with Clea or practiced his magic. His father, Geo, and the guards, who had already recovered from their injuries, spent this period hunting alongside his esteemed father-in-law, Blake. On the 15th day, Geo, accompanied by Mark, bid farewell to Blake. They had been away for 2 weeks and needed to return to the southern port castle to report their safety. They were set to bring back their abundant harvest. Undoubtedly, a bountiful return. The group had also increased in number, swelling from 50 to 400 individuals. Most of these were sent by Blake to assist in transporting the spoils of the hunt, including Blake's daughter, Mark's betrothed, Clea. Since awakening to his inheritance, Mark had found Clea constantly by his side, requesting that he narrate stories to her daily. Blake, knowing that the two towns were not far apart, permitted his daughter to accompany Mark back to his family's castle. He had merely dispatched a few maidens to ensure her safety. It could be said that both Blake and Aya felt entirely at ease in trusting their daughter to Mark's care. Mark, for his part, assured them repeatedly of Clea's safety. On a misty morning in the forest, the lingering fog that scattered across the land resembled the magic of gods descending upon the earth. Mark and Clea walked side by side, with Clea, a lively and energetic girl, unable to remain still, continuously chattering about everything she knew. Mark beamed at her, causing Clea to blush deeply, prompting her to swiftly change the subject. Mark, do you think the seaside is fun? I've never been to the beach before. Upon reaching your family's castle, might you take me to the seaside for some delightful recreation? Mark, equally enchanted by the young lady, affirmed with a beaming countenance. Certainly, Cray. Once we arrive at the shore, you may indulge in any activities your heart desires. However, we must first rest for a day or two after our arduous journey, for travel can indeed be quite exhausting. Cray walked alongside Mark, hands clasped behind her back, nodding in agreement to his words. Indeed, the roads here are perilously difficult to traverse. The darkness is unsettling, and when rain falls, they transform into treacherous mud. How wonderful it would be if they were paved with smooth stones. At that moment, Cray deftly shifted the conversation from the roads to the merriment awaiting at the seaside. Once we reach your family's castle, I shall ensure to enjoy myself thoroughly. At home, my mother incessantly insists that I study peculiar etiquette, leaving me little time for play. Now that I have finally escaped, I can truly be myself. She feigned a serious demeanor, lightly tapping her forehead. I have discovered that I possess no talent for learning such formalities, and with ample time now, I can truly relax. Would you care to join me? Cray, feeling quite at ease beside Mark, deliberately adopted a mature pose with her hands behind her back. She cleared her throat gently and raised her voice slightly. As your guest, I trust that, as my mother asserts, I shall possess the rights of a visitor, which include being protected and accompanied in my merriment. You must take me to the seaside to build a castle as beautiful and splendid as the ones you have described in your tales. The rights of a guest imply that after partaking of the host's bread and salt, one must not harm or neglect the guest. Mark softly corrected her, observing Cray's bright eyes, and nodded helplessly. During this time, she had consistently drawn him into her playful endeavors. Mark had regaled her with various fairy tales from his past life, including those of Snow White and the Frog Prince. After hearing such enchanting stories, the little girl often tugged at Mark's sleeve, urging him to play by the riverbank in their quaint town. Naturally, he had no reason to refuse this charming girl, and thus, he frequently carved out time to indulge in her playful whims. This led to the current situation, wherein the young girl had become quite attached to Mark, which is why her parents felt secure in allowing Cray to accompany him back to the castle. As Mark listened to Cray's words, he began to surmise that her mother was likely a person of considerable nobility. The reasons for her becoming the wife of a town leader remained a mystery. However, it was evident from the manner in which Cray was educated that her mother was quite progressive, diligently teaching her etiquette while allowing her to retain her innocence. Mark's own lessons in etiquette were predominantly imparted by his mother, Clena, or guided by the clergy. Each day, both he and Jorah had to diligently study the nuances of conduct and propriety, an endeavor that, while rather dull, was deemed essential. This is an exceedingly beneficial course for future interactions. Clea, your mother, who insisted on your accompanying me, has urged me to supervise your study of the fundamental knowledge required to recognize nobility. Therefore, while you may indulge in play, it is equally essential that you diligently absorb this foundational knowledge. Your earnestness in learning will enable you to discern the developmental histories of various families, as well as the heraldry associated with their lineages. It can be said that your current responsibilities have become quite formidable. Upon hearing Mark's words, Clea's cheerful demeanor swiftly transformed into one of discontent, her smile wavering. She dashed back from the front, tugging gently at Mark's arm, her rosy cheeks reflecting her reluctance as she implored, "Mark, you are the best to me. Can I not study those things? I have finally found some time to play, and now I am suddenly burdened with so much learning. I can hardly imagine how dreary my life in Malmont Town will be." Mark, observing her reaction, understood that at this age, it is not easy to compel a child to focus on their studies. Only those who have endured bleak circumstances and despair can truly grasp the importance of seizing opportunities to ascend. "Do not fret, Clea. Once we reach our family's castle, I shall persuade my mother to alleviate some of the pressure on your studies. I will accompany you in your learning endeavors. Moreover, if you excel in your studies, I will dedicate an entire day to play with you. What do you say?" Typically, Mark would only play with her for a few hours before attending to his own matters, so the prospect of spending an entire day together filled Clea with joy. "Mark, you must not go back on your word," she declared, thumping her chest in assurance. "As long as you promise to play with me all day, I vow to take my studies seriously. I promise, Clea, as long as you fulfill your part, I will wholeheartedly devote a day to play with you." Mark affirmed with a nod. Clea, elated by his promise, bounced with joy. Zhao and Jola exchanged glances. Zhao looked at the bewildered Jola and then at the jubilant girl circling around Mark, inwardly reflecting on how, while both sons exhibited remarkable courage from a young age, one appeared astute while the other seemed somewhat oblivious, behaving like an ordinary child. Ultimately, Zhao gently shook his head, dismissing the thoughts from his mind. He could not help but muse that each generation has its own fortune. With two such exceptional sons, what more could one desire? He simply wished for their robust growth. The group moved like a long serpent along the muddy path for 3 days. As the third day drew to a close, Mark finally spotted the distant town. The throngs of people and abundant goods, coupled with the detours taken, had contributed to the 3-day journey to Malmont Town. As dusk approaches, wisps of smoke begin to rise. Clena, Mark's mother, waits at the town's entrance, as she often does when Gio returns, seemingly aware of their arrival long before. Upon seeing the safe return of the 3 men, the tension in her heart dissipates, and the faint sorrow that often graces her features transforms into a sweet smile. Gio, noticing his wife Clena awaiting him, strides over and envelopes her in a warm embrace. Though taken aback by the suddenness of the hug, perhaps stirred by waves of longing, Clena quickly places her hands around her husband's neck and buries her head against his chest. After a moment, recalling the presence of others, she gently releases her hold and, lifting her gaze, is met by the sight of their 2 sons nearby, which brings a blush to her cheeks. As a tender woman, being swept into her husband's arms before their children renders her shy. She whispers softly into Gio's ear, "Please put me down. This is quite embarrassing with the children watching." Gio, unfazed, replies, "It's been so long since their father has seen their mother. What is the harm in a hug?" Yet, considering his wife's discomfort, he gently sets her down. Clena playfully taps Gio on the shoulder as she regains her footing. Gio then turns to their 3 children, recounting the experiences of the past few days, including the revelation that Mark has a fiancée, without concealing any details. Clena does not express anger or discontent, but quietly inquires, "Isn't this a bit premature?" With a smile, Gio reassures her, this was bound to happen sooner or later. It might be better to cultivate a childhood sweetheart for him. Clena, smiling, nods at the 3 children after surveying them. Following their discussion, Clena briskly approaches the trio. She examines the little girl closely, who shyly lowers her gaze. Although she has heard about her from her husband, seeing her up close leaves Clena somewhat astonished. Initially indifferent to the girl's appearance, she now notices the silver hair and violet eyes that hint at her uniqueness. Engaging in conversation with Mark and Jola, Clena gently asks, "Is this little girl your fiancée, Mark? She is truly a beautiful and charming young lady. She will undoubtedly grow into a stunning woman. You are indeed fortunate." Hearing Clena's words, Leah, the girl, gazes back at her without a hint of shyness, and with a clear voice, she replies, "You must be Mark's mother, Mrs. Clena. You are very beautiful, just like my mother. My name is Leah. You may call me Leah, ma'am." Mrs. Clena, intrigued by the bold little girl, responds softly, "Leah, you are quite adorable and so well-mannered. Your smile is as sweet as honey. Thank you for your kind words." Simultaneously, "You are a charming and beautiful young lady. May I touch you?" Clea nodded in consent. Clena, not one to hold back, gently caressed the little girl while saying, "Welcome to the Mormont family. I trust you will soon come to adore this place." Clea took a liking to Mark's gentle and lovely mother, and with a natural eagerness, she softly replied, "Of course, you are Mark's mother, my elder, so it is only fitting. Madam, Mark often speaks of you, his kind and gentle mother." Clena smiled softly and affectionately stroked Clea, whispering, "What a delightful young lady you are. If anyone troubles you, do not hesitate to come to me. I shall advocate for you, my dear." Amidst their conversation, Geo had already begun organizing the unloading of their supplies. The meat and hides had been cured and dried by the time they reached the valley town, merely awaiting placement in the storeroom adjacent to the castle. Naturally, the staple food of rye and other cultivable grains were plentiful, thriving across such extensive fields. Consequently, the current yield far surpassed that of 5 harvests in previous years, with the storeroom already over half filled. The old scholar, upon seeing these supplies, wore a smile. Such provisions could indeed be life-saving. Chapter 16. Mark's plans. After Geo and his 2 sons returned from Valley Town, they hosted a grand welcome banquet that very evening. With Clea as the guest of honor, the daughter of the Valley Town's chieftain and now Mark's betrothed. Additionally, it served to celebrate the successful outcome of their recent hunt. Although the journey had its challenges, it ultimately concluded favorably. The flickering candlelight illuminated the lively gathering, as the joy of the harvest warmed the hearts of the townsfolk. Thus, the grand feast continued late into the night. As they were about to retire, at Clea's request, Mark's mother, Kleina, arranged for her bedroom to be adjacent to Mark's. She wholeheartedly supported the idea of the 2 children growing closer. Under his mother's watchful eye, Mark led Clea to her new abode, which would be her residence for a considerable time to come. After returning to his room to freshen up, Mark lay in bed, unable to sleep as he reflected on his recent achievements. He had become a priest of a mountain tribe comprising over 25,000 souls. This would serve as a formidable alliance or perhaps a following in the future. Furthermore, during this period, he had amassed nearly 500 gold dragons and over 100 sets of weapons and armor. Additionally, throughout the hunt, he had discovered several highly fertile lands conducive to farming. Though still quite young, Mark resolved not to remain idle. He yearned to manifest some of his thoughts and plans. After making up his mind, he planned to discuss it with his father the following day in hopes of gaining his approval. Mark, feeling quite pleased, soon succumbed to slumber, perhaps due to the exhaustion from his long journey and the recent banquet. Youth is indeed a blessing, as he fell asleep almost instantly. At dawn, wisps of smoke began to rise from the rooftops of the quaint town. Mark awoke early, stretching languidly in bed before dressing and making his way to the hall. He discovered that Jorah and Clea, as was customary, had yet to rise. In the hall, only his parents were present, quietly enjoying their breakfast. Mark greeted them and took a seat at the long table. Shortly after, a maid arrived with a tray bearing several slices of white and black bread, a piece of freshly roasted meat, and a cup of hot water, which she placed before him. Mark nodded in gratitude, and the maid, accustomed to his politeness, smiled and bowed gently before retreating. The breakfast at Bear Island was not extravagant, but it surpassed that of the majority. After taking a bite of bread and sipping the hot water, he heard his father speak. "Mark, your fiancé E and Jorah have yet to rise. Remember to wake them shortly, and the 2 of you should take your fiancé E for a stroll around the town to familiarize yourselves with the surroundings." Mark looked up and nodded in acknowledgement. "I understand, father. I will call them shortly." He then bit his lip, casting aside the last vestiges of hesitation, and slowly added, "There is a matter I wish to discuss with you." Geo, intrigued by Mark's demeanor, looked up in surprise. "Do tell. I am eager to hear what it is. As long as it is not too outrageous, I shall agree." Mark gathered his thoughts and conveyed what he had contemplated the previous night. "Father, during our recent hunting expedition, I noticed several areas suitable for cultivating crops. Now that summer is upon us, I intend to bring some guards and farmers to develop these lands for agriculture. I wish to challenge myself and harvest some crops to prepare for the approaching long night." Geo did not respond immediately, taking time to ponder Mark's proposal. However, Clea, overhearing their discussion, quickly interjected with disapproval. "Mark, I cannot agree to this. You may create a ruckus within our territory as you please, but venturing outside poses too great a danger. Surely, you understand why we have refrained from developing those prime areas? Though the soil is fertile, we lack sufficient manpower, and the complex environment, compounded by numerous wild beasts, makes the deep forests perilous. Just a mere 3 leagues from us lies a prime location. Yet it is too close to the woods and fraught with danger. Even in our small town, wild beasts frequently roam, not to mention the desolate outskirts." Zhao wholeheartedly agreed with his wife's assertion and turned to Mark, whose expression was filled with anticipation. He reluctantly explained that indeed, the wilderness was teeming with beasts, elusive and unpredictable. "Surely, during the recent hunt, you must have felt this firsthand. We lack sufficient manpower. Although there have been some agreements with Blake, you are still underage and unable to fulfill them. Furthermore, we do not possess enough material and financial resources to explore and develop promising locations. If you seek to hone your abilities, I can assist you in locating a piece of abandoned land nearby. Mark was well aware of the dangers that lurked in the deep mountains and forests. However, most of the land in the vicinity had already been developed, and no suitable areas had been discovered in recent years. Moreover, Mark's intention to clear land was not solely to cultivate crops. It was also to establish basic agricultural facilities and create a secret base for the settlement of summoned individuals. He could not allow his rewards to languish in storage. Within this secret base, he could recruit and train soldiers, allowing them to gain experience in combat, while simultaneously eliminating the surrounding beast populations. Fearing that his plans might fall through, Mark earnestly argued, "I have considered these concerns, mother and father. I plan to recruit more able-bodied youth without delving too deeply into the dense forests. I will focus on the coastal plains, such as the vast ones in the north. If we develop these areas now, we could harvest a substantial amount of grain before the long night descends. Moreover, I currently have 10 elite guards. We can provide reasonable arrangements for the unemployed youth and those without land to cultivate. While they farm, they can also undergo training. It is not necessary for them to be exceptionally skilled. Achieving the ability to fend off wild beasts would be quite commendable. I assure you, my safety would not be a significant concern. If this endeavor succeeds, it would garner the recognition and approval of the townsfolk." Mark's parents fell into contemplation, realizing that there were indeed young people in the town without land to farm. As robust northerners, some disturbances had arisen. A reasonable arrangement could indeed enhance the public's acceptance of Mark. Zhao was about to discuss some details when Klena, who was nearby, appeared somewhat uneasy. She attempted to dissuade Mark by emphasizing his youth. "Mark, my dear child, you are still quite young. Perhaps it would be wiser to wait a few more years before making plans." Seeing success within reach, Mark was determined not to abandon his current strategy. Since acquiring the system, he had been formulating this plan. Now, having finally mustered the courage to discuss it with his parents, his height had already surpassed that of his peers. He sought to establish his own armed force and to strengthen the power of Bear Island as soon as possible. For Bear Island was indeed a place ripe for development. On the island, apart from their family, there are scarcely any others residing there. Of course, the tribe of his inexpensive father-in-law, Blake, is significantly more powerful than their own. Surrounded by the vast ocean, this place would be an idyllic paradise for farming, were it not for the erratic seasonal changes marked by prolonged nights and endless summers. "Mother, you must believe me. I am now as robust as a lad in his teens, with little distinction in strength, coupled with my considerable martial skills. Surely you are aware of my cleverness? Moreover, I have nearly mastered the teachings imparted by Bachelor Jerry and have learned to protect myself. Therefore, I implore you to trust me." Just as Gio was about to speak, Bachelor Jerry approached briskly, having just retrieved a letter from the Raven, announcing it bore news from Winterfell, updates regarding King's Landing and the Citadel. As Jerry passed by Mark greeted him softly. Jerry nodded in acknowledgement and continued to address Mark's parents. "My lords, Lady Mormont, we have received the latest news from Winterfell via Raven. Princess Riella is with child. King Aegon V intends to journey to Summerhall soon with members of the royal family, although the reasons remain undisclosed. Furthermore, the letters from the Citadel proclaim that this long summer is expected to endure for 3 years." Gio took the letter from Jerry's hand and perused it before passing it to Kleina, who, after reading it attentively, furrowed her brow. Gio remarked with concern, "The current king is overly obsessed with dragons, yearning for their rebirth in his grasp. He has summoned numerous alchemists to extract wildfire for him, and I cannot shake a foreboding sense of dread." Bachelor Jerry quietly affirmed, "Indeed, my lord, our king is quite mad. The remnants of black fire on the stepstones are also stirring. It is safe to say this long summer is anything but tranquil." Mark's mother, Kleina, added, "Fortunately, we are distanced from these conflicts on Bear Island. Otherwise, given our current state, we would surely become mere pawns in their power struggles." From his parents and the bachelor, Mark gleaned crucial information and began to piece together the situation. The current King Aegon had dispatched ravens to inform the 7 great lords of Iris and his wife, Princess Riella's pregnancy. While his parents might be unaware, Mark, as a time traveler, possessed some foreknowledge. The king must have begun assembling a multitude of sorcerers to attempt hatching dragons at Summerhall, with plans to try by next year. Mark shook his head, recalling his conversation with his parents and his current objectives. Upon hearing of the impending 3-year summer, he softly spoke, "Father, mother, the place I have chosen is not far. You should be aware that it lies in the region between us and the mountain folk. The landscape is remarkably flat, with minimal woodland and mountains, and a river of considerable size flows through it. If we can utilize our portion of the flat land, communication between both parties will become exceedingly convenient. and it may also serve as a training ground for future hunting endeavors. Furthermore, my father is aware that I am still the priest of the mountain folk, and I can also gather a contingent of young men from their community. We are currently in the midst of an extended summer, an opportune time for cultivating crops. Moreover, with the strength of the guard, my safety in that region is assured. Thus, I implore you to grant my request. Mark's mother ceased her opposition, though concern lingered on her face. Mark's father, Gio, clenched his teeth and ultimately made a decision, stating, I can acquiesce to your request, but I cannot provide you with many hands, as we also require manpower for our own fields. At most, I can offer you around 200 young men without land and some farming tools. You will need to devise a plan for the rest. Do you agree? Mark, who was not lacking in manpower, felt elated upon hearing this condition and quickly replied, Certainly. I appreciate my father's support. I will gather the additional needed young men from Uncle Blake. Gio nodded in agreement, recognizing that Blake's Valley town was connected to them, and it was likely that there would be young men there without farmland. He had no concerns about Mark's ability to recruit. He then inquired about Mark's intended departure. When do you plan to leave? Do you need me to inform Blake in advance? Mark welcomed this suggestion, as it made recruiting young men much more convenient. I plan to continue my studies with Bachelor Jerry for a while longer. However, my parents seemed to sense his underlying thoughts and looked at him with skepticism. Mark, blushing and feeling awkward, explained, Of course, there's another reason. Since Clea has just arrived here, I intend to spend some time with her before sending her back after a month. During that time, I also plan to gather a group of young men at Uncle Blake's. That seems reasonable. Leaving the young lady here while you venture off is hardly appropriate, Gio remarked, before continuing to discuss recent matters with Mark's mother and Bachelor Jerry. Chapter 17. The Chosen Place. Throughout the past month, Mark dedicated a significant portion of his time to frolicking by the seaside with Clea, while I occupied myself by fishing in the nearby river and searching for bird eggs in the trees. This period marked one of Mark's happiest times, and it was equally joyful for Clea and Jola. Additionally, Mark allocated a small amount of time to master the inherited magic from the priestess memories. Now, he could observe the movements around him through the surrounding trees, which had become extensions of his arms and eyes. Through diligent study and reflection on his own understanding, he has combined insights from life magic's healing to develop a novel skill enhancement. His experiments have revealed that he can extract either a substantial or a modest portion of life force from the surrounding trees to bolster his guards or himself. This essence manifests as a green, translucent liquid, aptly termed the elixir of life. A mere drop can augment a person's average attributes by 10 points. To ensure sustainable extraction, he opts to draw only a small fraction of life force at random intervals, requiring approximately 2 weeks for recovery. Mark has allowed ample time for recovery by designating several areas for rotational extraction. Furthermore, he has conducted trials on animals. While these extractions do not lead to immediate loss of life, they do render the creatures weak for about a month, yielding a red liquid that only enhances attributes by approximately 5 points. Thus, he has abandoned the practice on animals. Over the past month, Mark and his guards have traversed the surrounding forests. He performs the life force extraction on trees located at a distance. This skill is not without its limitations, as it can only be utilized 5 times a month due to its significant toll on mental energy. Thankfully, his mental fortitude is quite robust. Throughout the month, he successfully collected 5 instances of the elixir of life, 4 from plants and 1 from an animal. He has consumed 2 doses, 1 from each source, administering them to himself and his chief guard, Martin. After partaking of the elixir, Martin now possesses an average attribute of 20 points, embodying the strength of a top-tier knight, which enables him to better safeguard Mark. Both have achieved an average of 20 points in attributes, representing the prowess of elite knights, albeit with a slight deficiency in technique. Nevertheless, Mark is diligently honing combat skills alongside his chief guard, Martin. Currently, Mark's mental energy has fully replenished, and he has gathered a capable assembly of young, robust individuals adept at farming, who can also be trained as guards. He has resolved to prioritize the training of his military forces, postponing the administration of the elixir to his parents for the time being, recognizing that at his tender age, some matters require a patient approach. Recently, Mark undertook another reconnaissance mission to identify a more advantageous location for cultivation. Upon crossing a river and traveling for some time, he discovered a more suitable site, a lake where the river emerges. Ahead lies an expansive area boasting a remarkable plain, leading further to the colossal ice bay, separated by a frozen coastline. This site is naturally fortified. On the right, a vast lake from which the river flows into the ice bay, while the rear and left are bordered by mountains, presenting an ideal setting for urban development. by erecting a formidable wall along the coastline. This could evolve into a thriving port city. Mark feels fortunate that this location is not far from his family's estate, with a direct distance requiring only about a day's journey. During this journey, a right turn leads to the tribe of Blake's inexpensive father-in-law, merely a day's travel away, which can be considered quite convenient. Mark finalized the new farming location, and the next morning, while having breakfast, he shared his thoughts. Although Gio anticipated this day, he was surprised it arrived so soon. Mark directly articulated the advantageous conditions of the chosen land. "Father, this is the finest piece of land I have selected, requiring just about a day's journey. Moreover, a new road would enhance accessibility. Located near the frozen coast, it boasts exceptionally hard timber suitable for crafting tools or spear shafts. Furthermore, it is highly convenient for journeys back home or to Uncle Blake's." Gio realized he could not alter his son's mindset, but the presence of frequently smuggling wild folk or iron men in the area prompted him to prepare 20 guards. "Mark, I know you have always been remarkably clever and that I cannot persuade you to turn back. Therefore, I will assign you an additional 20 guards and seek out a few more capable young men. Please do not hastily refuse. It is for your safety. Regardless of success or failure, safety must come first," stated Clena, unusually firm, with an expression that left no room for dissent. "Mark, this time you cannot decline our goodwill. You are the hope of our family. We all wish for your safe maturation, but your brilliance clearly does not allow for recklessness. Hence, these guards must be accepted for your protection." Mark was deeply moved, understanding the age-old sentiment of a mother's worries for her child. He no longer resisted his parents' kindness and assured them, "Father and mother, you need not worry. Should any uncontrollable danger arise, I will promptly return home with the guard." After conversing with his parents a while longer, he returned to his residence to prepare his belongings. Mark intended to set off today to visit the Blake tribe and recruit a group of young men. He bid farewell to his parents and embarked on the journey with his young fiancée, who appeared somewhat downcast, clearly reluctant to leave. After all, during this time, Mark had shown her around the entire town, and she might also miss her gentle mother, Clena. Ultimately, after much persuasion from Mark, she agreed to accompany him to her home, promising that they would return together when time permitted or that he would come for her once his construction was complete. Having finally set forth on their journey, Mark brought along 100 young men, accompanied by a 30-member guard, along with Clea and a few of his aides. The other members who had assisted in transporting goods a month prior had already returned to their tribe. It wasn't that Mark could not afford more. Rather, after a month, his sign-in system had allowed him to enlist 100 skilled farmers upon his initial encounter yesterday, thus reducing the need for additional recruitment from his own territory. After a day of travel, they finally returned to Clea's home, where they were warmly welcomed. Upon Mark revealing the purpose of his visit, the conversation continued. Without hesitation, Blake, the father-in-law, agreed to Mark's request and promptly recruited 500 able-bodied youths for him. He also prepared a month's worth of provisions, for which Mark was immensely grateful. Chapter 18. Arrival and future plans. Early the next morning, a large group set forth northward, under the watchful eyes of the Blake couple and Mark's fiancée. Mark was clad in a thick black inner lining beneath his armor, adorned with a black bear insignia on his sleeves and a cloak crafted from dark beast hide, also featuring the black bear motif. At his side hung a long sword and his trusty dagger, and fortunately, Mark's extraordinary physique rendered these items weightless. Accompanying him were 10 warriors in iron armor, draped in black cloaks embroidered with the black bear emblem, each wielding a distinctive long sword with a straight blade, the tips seemingly broken off, designed for effective cleaving. Additionally, 20 guards donned black leather armor and cloaks, similarly adorned with the black bear design, armed with standard one-handed swords. Among them, 2 bore the sigil of House Mormont, leading the procession. The guards flanked the group of nearly 600 as they made their way northward, accompanied by 20 large carts provided by Mark's generous father-in-law. Without his assistance, transporting their belongings would have proven a significant challenge. The road was uneven and narrow, and although it had been hastily repaired before Mark's arrival, passage remained difficult. Fortunately, the youthful strength of the group allowed for swift movement, and soon they faded from the sight of the Blake family. Tears glistened in Claria's eyes as she felt a twinge of sadness at the thought of being separated from her beloved companion and fiancé for an extended period, prompting her mother, Ellie, to offer continual comfort. As afternoon approached, the abundance of supplies necessitated a halt, and they set up camp to spend the night outdoors. Mark arranged the carts in a protective circle around the group, effectively safeguarding them from potential wild animal attacks. Although the sounds of beasts echoed in the distance, their sheer numbers deterred any close encounters, rendering the night unusually serene. At dawn, The group swiftly packed their belongings and continued their journey. By afternoon, they finally beheld a vast lake and expansive plains ahead. Mark gently tugged on his steed's reins and, with the assistance of his guard Martin, dismounted. Speaking of warhorses, they were a rare commodity in his family, and indeed, throughout the entire north, warhorses were scarce. Mark's father, Geo, had diligently selected 20 from their family's meager stock of 320 warhorses, including Mares, to gift to Mark. Naturally, Mark was overjoyed, for in a world where transportation was arduous, horses represented one of the most vital resources. Mark gazed upon the jubilant crowd and addressed Captain Martin of the guard. Captain Martin, allow the people a brief respite, then commence the establishment of the camp. The dusk approaches, and there is little time left to construct the enclosure. The supply wagons are gathered around us. Tomorrow, we shall seek raw materials in the vicinity to erect the fencing. Understood, my lord. I shall make the necessary arrangements at once. Captain Martin was unwavering in his commitment to Mark's directives. He saluted with one hand placed over his heart and proceeded to organize the tasks at hand. Martin had taken the place of Dake, who remained at his family estate with several guards to ensure the safety of his kin. Mark rode forth with a contingent of guards to the seaside, listening intently to the rhythmic caress of the waves upon the shore, as if it were a symphony of exquisite melodies. The icebound bay, on particularly frigid nights, sometimes succumbed to frost, and being nestled within the bay, it lacked the tumultuous depths of the trembling sea, instead displaying a serene azure reflection. As night enveloped the land, a natural bridge formed, enabling the wild denizens of the frozen coast to traverse southward. However, should the long night not endure, and without adequate preparation, such a journey could prove perilous, with the risk of succumbing to the thawing ice and plunging into the icy depths, a fate not uncommon. Mark attentively surveyed the shoreline, where rocks, eroded by the relentless surf, lay exposed beneath the setting sun, whispering tales of an ancient history. He recognized this as an excellent source of raw materials. Although much of it had been battered by the sea, its strength remained unchallenged. Thus, he had identified a prime location for quarrying stone. Mark contemplated dividing his workforce into 3 groups, one dedicated to extracting stone to first establish a broad foundation for a low wall, another to utilize the quarried stone in constructing dwellings and fortifications, and the third to cultivate the barren land. There was still ample time to plant a season's crop. After a month, he intended to harvest the lifeless trees, absorbing their vitality. While this would render them desiccated, it would also serve a dual purpose in construction, thus minimizing waste. Upon completing his observations, Mark proceeded to the river's mouth, instructing his guards to procure a plant resembling bamboo, approximately 10 meters in length. He tested the waters, discovering that even near the shore, the depth reached around 5 to 6 meters, indicating its suitability for a harbor. After testing several locations with similar depths, he grew increasingly confident in its potential as a port. The river appeared notably wide, estimated at about 50 meters. With the current flowing gently, Mark was thoroughly pleased with the choice of this auspicious site. After his reconnaissance, he returned to the bustling camp, where activity thrived. Mark opened the provisions he had preserved for a considerable time. A month swiftly elapsed, in stark contrast to the previously tranquil northern region of Bear Island. A fervent atmosphere now prevails, with some individuals even baring their arms as they gaze upon colossal stones. The coastline has been transformed with the establishment of numerous small workshops dedicated to the production of cement. A fortnight ago, an iron ore deposit was discovered in an area where trees were sparse. Mark became aware that the island was not lacking in mineral resources, yet many remained untapped. Upon acquiring these materials, he established a modest workshop for crafting iron tools, mending broken implements, and repurposing waste. Moreover, Mark unearthed limestone beneath the rocky strata, crushing it into small fragments for calcination. The lakeside also boasted an abundance of clay. He constructed forges resembling chimneys, into which he introduced low-grade iron, ore, limestone, and clay in specific proportions, subjecting them to intense heat through continuous smelting. This endeavor yielded cement, which has now begun to be utilized for constructing walls. The result not only enhances aesthetic appeal, but also fortifies strength. Within the valley, 2 straight cement pathways have emerged, hinting at the nascent form of a burgeoning city. While overseeing the construction of the city walls, Mark ensured that the foundation was sufficiently broad, approximately 100 feet, allowing for future expansions. Currently, the walls stand at a height of about 10 feet, or 2 men tall, their silhouette becoming increasingly pronounced, extending 4 kilometers to connect directly with the mountains on the left, reaching the lakeside. The scale of this undertaking is considerable. Fortunately, the population has surged by 3. 000 over the past month, bringing his retinue of guards to 600, clad in black armor adorned with a black bear emblem and draped in dark cloaks, with straight-bladed swords at their sides. These newly recruited guards engage in simple training daily, their attendance being notably high. Mark has also assigned them various tasks, ensuring that aside from the necessary patrols, most are dispatched in shifts for hunting or fishing, thus securing ample food supplies. The burgeoning population, now totaling around 4,000, combined with the original inhabitants, surpasses even that of his father's time in terms of both numbers and military strength. However, this rapid increase has significantly burdened their food resources, which are now insufficient for their consumption. Fortunately, the lake and mountains teem with wildlife. Moreover, Mark unabashedly seeks assistance from his affable father-in-law and father for provisions, seizing the opportunity to visit family and his betrothed. This patchwork of resources barely sustains them until the harvest season. The priority of clearing land has resulted in the sowing of a season-S crop, which now flourishes and will bear fruit in a month's time. Beneath Mark's audacious demeanor, he has procured a substantial supply of provisions from 2 families. It is with this bounty, coupled with the relentless efforts of these individuals, that he has erected a wall of considerable height. Yet, Mark remains unsatisfied. He plans to encircle the entire valley, transforming it into a formidable fortress. This endeavor is expected to consume approximately a year to complete. However, he is in no haste, for time is plentiful. Chapter 19. Daily life. As Mark diligently constructs his castle, time passes swiftly. He engages in his daily pursuits, and soon the harvest arrives, while the growth of the population begins to slow. Nevertheless, the stockpile of weaponry has increased. Among the newly summoned individuals, Mark gathers a cadre of craftsmen skilled in shipbuilding. At a lake he has named Bear Lake, he commences the establishment of a shipyard. With everything now falling into place, Mark finds himself in a state of leisure. The roads have been smoothed, and he walks upon a path laid with gravel and cement. Not only has he developed internal roads, but he has also begun to construct a well-paved road leading to the small town of his family and the mountain village where his father-in-law resides. Accompanied by his captain of the guard, Mark rides along the flat road to the shipbuilding site by the lake. Recently, he has discovered a number of skilled shipwrights among the summoned individuals, and the shipyard by the lakeshore has begun to take on a significant scale. Upon his arrival, Mark approaches the responsible personnel and quietly inquires, "Has the shipyard gotten on track? Have you encountered any difficulties? Please, do not hesitate to express any assistance you may require in the shipbuilding process. I shall ensure it is promptly addressed." The person in charge, initially apprehensive upon being summoned by Mark, feels a sense of relief upon realizing the nature of the inquiry. With a reassuring pat on his chest, he responds, "Thank you, my lord, for your concern. Rest assured, our workforce is sufficient, and we are currently constructing a large vessel. This ship is approximately 200 feet long, 40 feet high, and 40 feet wide at its broadest point. It features multiple internal compartments to prevent flooding should any section take on water. Its propulsion system will be powered by 2 substantial sails, capable of reaching a maximum speed of 13 knots in favorable winds. Moreover, for wartime needs, each vessel can accommodate at least 3 military ballistae. With ample materials, we expect to launch it for trial within 2 months. However, my lord, we currently lack waterproofing paint, which would significantly extend the ship's lifespan. We have managed to gather most of the necessary coatings, but one component, a type of resin, is rather scarce, albeit commonly found. While we now have sufficient shipbuilders, we are unable to spare anyone to seek out this waterproof resin." Under the guidance of the supervisor, Mark observed the contours of the vessel while attentively listening to the supervisor's requests. Gazing at the imposing ship, nearly 200 feet in length, he recognized that without adequate sealing and waterproofing, such a colossal craft would inevitably face a diminished lifespan. Mark had long since begun gathering information on resins in preparation for shipbuilding. With a relaxed demeanor, he confidently stated, "You continue to construct more vessels. I shall take care of the waterproofing with the resin, and I will also supply you with the necessary materials. Your sole responsibility is to produce larger and more numerous ships, ensuring their quality, as this is paramount to the safety of our future seafarers." Upon hearing that materials would be readily available, the supervisor thumped his chest and reassured, "Rest assured. We have several seasoned craftsmen who are already designing a vessel approximately 300 feet in length. We are currently working on alternatives for the keel, as the timber available on our island is insufficient to withstand the weight of such a large ship during its voyages." Suddenly, Mark recalled the ironwood trees that thrive along the frozen coastline, a species renowned for its steel-like hardness. These trees are widespread and can reach heights exceeding 200 feet. flourishing beneath the frostbite peaks in a vast ironwood forest. Addressing the supervisor, he said, "You need not worry. I believe I have found a suitable material. Once your ships are completed, I will procure these materials, enabling you to construct even larger vessels." Although the supervisor was unaware of the specifics of the material Mark mentioned, he was nonetheless elated at the prospect of an alternative. After all, what shipwright wouldn't aspire to craft larger and superior vessels? The supervisor eagerly assured, "Fear not. With this material you speak of, I guarantee we will produce larger and better ships, ensuring the hulls are of impeccable quality, allowing for stable navigation upon the seas." Mark continued to observe the various ships alongside the supervisor, eagerly anticipating the prospect of a formidable fleet engaged in trade, as he could not afford to remain idle. With the supervisor's diligent explanations, he gained a clearer understanding of the shipyard's operations. After a day of exploration and a light meal at the shipyard, he bid farewell to the supervisor as he exited through the grand gates, concluding yet another monotonous day of inspections. The following day, he returned to the construction site of the city walls. As time passed, the walls rose steadily, and the surrounding mountains were alive with the fervor of construction. Mark had left 2 gates along the coast, which opened directly to the ocean, where numerous small vessels had ceased operations. These were tasked with capturing seals and swordfish in the sunsetting sea. Naturally, whales also inhabited these waters, while abundant schools of fish and shellfish thrived not far from the shore, forming a primary source of sustenance for Mark and his companions. Certainly, each of the other 3 walls also features a gateway, with the estuary serving as the outlet where the lake flows into the sea. This was ingeniously transformed into a port that directly connects to the inner lake, facilitating the smooth passage of small to medium-sized vessels for the transportation of goods. The coastline is also being developed to accommodate larger ships, laying the groundwork for a future port city. Soon, Mark encountered the individual responsible for the port's construction. After a series of inconsequential exchanges, he gleaned from their conversation that the establishment and operation of the port would require a considerable amount of time. Mark refrained from pressing them and instead advised the official to ensure the quality of the construction, emphasizing the necessity for durability to extend its lifespan. Regular maintenance, of course, would also be indispensable. The official, with a demeanor of earnest attentiveness, assured Mark with unwavering confidence, "Rest assured, sir, the quality of the port will be exceptional, ensuring its functionality for many years to come. Thanks to the cement you have provided, its longevity will be significantly enhanced. Once completed, we will also dispatch personnel for regular maintenance." Mark was naturally very pleased with this assurance. Observing the vibrant and flourishing Ice City, his chosen name for the settlement located in the northern part of Bear Island, across from the colorful coast, he felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The Ice Bay envelopes the entire island, hence the name. The planned inner city, which would eventually serve as the administrative center or Mark's residence, is gradually taking shape. Watching this city grow, much like a child nurtured in his hands, filled Mark with immense satisfaction.